Hello and welcome to the April 18th regular legislative meeting of the town of Vegreville. I call the meeting to order at 3:02, and I'll be looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to suggest that we move the matters for Director Lefebvre to the end of the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? All those in favor of the amended motion? Carried. Thank you very much. Next up, the adoption of our last regular meeting, legislative meeting. Councillor Lemko makes the motion. Is there any errors or omissions within those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. So we're going to go right to Director Saskew here and some really thrilling information. Take it away, Director Saskew.
Thank you. So first up, we have the 2023 property tax bylaw. So the memo that we have attached here, 2023 taxation requirements, goes through the information that's contained in our bylaw. So for the assessment, consistent with the MGA, the 2023 assessment reflects the market value of property as of July 1st, 2022 for the 2023 taxation year. The assessment was undertaken by our externally contracted assessor, Municipal Assessment Services, Inc. Overall, taxable assessments increased 3.11% from 2022. Residential assessments increased 4.71%, and non-residential assessment decreased by 0.01%, so relatively unchanged. For 2023, residential assessments make up 67.2% of total taxable assessment, and non-residential accounting for 32.8%. So the taxation bylaw, on November 28th, 2022, Town Council approved the 2023 operating budget and must approve a taxation bylaw annually to raise the necessary funds to produce the services approved in the budget. As in prior years, the levy is split 47% residential and 53% non-residential. The small business tax rate discount remains at 20%. So pursuant to the Municipal Government Act, the town is required to levy and pay the provincial education requisition. The 2023 education requisition decreased by a net amount of approximately $91,000 or 4.53% this year. The portion of the tax levied related to residential taxpayers decreased about $74,000 or 5.82%, while the portion of the tax levy related to non-residential ratepayers remains stable. The Minburn Foundation requisition for the Homestead Lodge decreased by approximately $981 or 0.49% this year, and impacts of changes in assessment. So as noted in 2 above, budget requirements were established when Town Council set the 2023 operating budget and approved it. Changes in assessment values do not have any impact on the budget requirements. So sometimes it's assumed that when overall assessments decline, as they have over the past several years, there is a corresponding decrease in taxes levied. This is not always the case. Once the budget is approved, the tax levy is set to collect the amounts required to satisfy budget requirements. So that's how we calculate the mill rate. We take the budget that we set, the assessment that we're given, and calculate the mill rate based on those 2 parameters and the 47-60-53 split between residential and non-residential, plus the requisitions. So I have here an illustration of a single family residential property. So in 2022, their assessment was $221,330. They saw an increase in their assessment for 2023. So this is this current year's assessment. It went up to $228,850. With the increase in the municipal levy, it's an additional $13.35. So $13.35 for the entire year. So $1 a month. But then we also saw decreases in the education requisition and the Minburn Foundation requisition. So this particular household will actually see a savings of $31.47 on their tax bill that they receive this year. So overall, relatively, even with the increase in assessment and the increase in the property tax revenue that's collected by the town, our ratepayers are going to see very comparable bills to prior year. So Schedule 1 and 2 go through a comparative analysis of 2023 versus 2022. And you can see that, they're the 2 pages back. You can see there's very little changes year over year. The requisitions have decreased, which is unheard of, but I've double checked the letters that we've received several times. And there is the 1.9 rounded to 2% increase in taxes levied by the town for our budget purposes. I also have the combined assessment and taxation notices. They will be mailed on May 11th, 2023. So the assessment date will be 7 days after the mailing date, and the appeal date will be 60 days after the assessment date or July 18th, 2023. Property taxes will be due no later than June 30th, 2023, and penalties will apply to late payments in accordance with our bylaw. That is unchanged. We're gonna move to the bylaw now. So this is a long bylaw.
Can we just stop there just for a second? Does anybody have any questions right now on the taxation requirements? Did the Minburn Foundation lower
Yes, by $918.
the requisitions? You guys passed that at a meeting?
It could be based on the most recent census.
Oh, that's right, because
Our
it's per
census
capita.
did,
Sorry,
yes.
yeah, I
So
forgot.
that would be, I think, part of the reason.
I think it's twofold. I think it's, sorry, your worship, I think it's both the most recent census as well as the increase in the residential assessment too.
Yeah.
I think that's just enough to be able to adjust it, because the increase in requisition that we had determined was appropriate isn't going to necessarily hit people's tax notices in any way. But this is even better than what we anticipated.
So, in the example you're showing on basically a $200,000 piece of property, even with the 2% increase that we showed, that we voted on, is that there'll still be a very small decrease in the actual cash that they need, okay?
Approximately $2 and change a month, they'll be paying less.
Perfect. Good, thank you. Now we'll carry on to the bylaw itself.
Okay, so I'm not gonna go into all the individual numbers. So it shows the requisitions from the Alberta School Foundation, 1.6 million. Elk Island Catholic, 316,000. MD and Minburn, 199,718. And then the designated industrial, those are the industrial properties which are assessed by the province. There's only a select few. They're like transmission lines and other items such as that. So 1905 for that specific. Our total taxable assessment is 724 million and some change. And then going into all the different tax levies and rates, overall, the residential rate is 11.81. Small business is 21.5753. Non-residential is 25.9404. Designated industrial properties are 26.015. And machinery and equipment is 22.1854. And if you look at my previous handout on Schedule 2, it has a comparison of current year versus prior year. So actually, 2023 rates are slightly less than prior year in almost all instances. In regards to the penalty dates, June 30th is a working day, so the first 15% penalty on all current taxes remaining unpaid after June 30th, 2023 will be levied. So that's the current year's tax balance. And then anything unpaid as of December 29th, that's the last working day in 2023, will also receive the 15% penalty on all taxes remaining unpaid as of that date. So that is, unless anybody has any more questions.
Okay, any questions for Director Stasky? Are we mailing out the taxation paperwork, like the assessment and the tax notices?
Yes, for the people that have not gone paperless, they will get them mailed. The people that are paperless will get them emailed. So same as in prior years.
And will there be a $2.50 charge?
That is something that I am still hoping to, yes, have a charge. I have not been able to successfully put it on our bill yet, so I will keep everyone updated. That is this week's project.
Okay, any thoughts regarding that? Okay, moving forward, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now to the fun stuff.
2022 audited financials. So the first attachment is my memo to council on the summary of these items as we go through, so they can be used in conjunction with each other. So if we open the memo, which looks like this, at the same time as the actual audited financials, I'm gonna go through the financials and speak basically off my speaking notes of my memo. So the first 2 pages of the financials are the independent auditor's report. This is the standard report issued by Wild & Company. It's saying that we don't have any material misstatements and that we are being issued an unqualified audit opinion, which is what we want. It sounds bad, but it's exactly what we want. It is very good news. The third page is the management responsibility for reporting. So that's just saying that I've prepared these financial statements and then Wild & Company has audited them. So that is just another formal letter that we need to have in there. Moving on to page 4 is the balance sheet. So that's the consolidated statement of financial position. So in the current year, the net debt position of the town decreased to 4.8 million from 4.83 million in 2021. This is largely the result of an improved cash position, offset by increases in accounts payable and accrued liabilities. So the increase in accounts payable is largely attributed to an increase in holdbacks that are payable for construction on Prosperity Park. So the way that works with our construction contracts is a portion of the invoice is held back, and then when we get WCB clearance and like final contract clearance, we release those holdbacks. So it's our way of taking recourse if work isn't done to standards after the fact. So those holdbacks are expected and they're part of a large project such as Prosperity. The net debt financial position indicates that the town does not have sufficient financial assets to repay its financial liabilities as of December 31st. This sounds bad, but it's important to note that long-term debt is 10.7 million. Of that, it is not all repayable in 1 year. And so it's actually repayable over the next 27 years. So if you take the current portion of long-term debt compared to our assets, the town is doing very well. So adjusting financial liabilities to reflect the current portion, it shows that we have sufficient financial assets to satisfy obligations. The town's total financial assets of 12.79 million decreased by approximately 104,000 in the current year, primarily due to a decrease in land held for resale due to the sale of several Foxview lots. So that's excellent news for the town. The town uses investments to provide a return on public funds. These funds consist of reserves, capital, provincial grants. Currently, the town has restricted reserves and deferred revenues approximately 8.21 million. Interest earned is something that is worth noting for this year. We have $254,000 in interest earned in the year compared to $95,000 in the prior year. So the increase in prime has done well for the town with our funds that are deferred for future projects, etc. So we've received a lot more interest than what we originally budgeted. So that is a nice change over prior years' poor interest returns that we had been getting. So overall, total liabilities are 4.8 million, or net debt is 4.8, non-financial assets are 61 million, and accumulated surplus is 57,133,008. So we are going to continue on. So our long-term debt, this is this chart right here. It showing that it's decreasing, so we have not taken out any additional debentures in the year. We've repaid long-term debt in the approximate number of $626,000. And then this next 2 charts are showing the debt limit in thousands and the debt service
I don't
limit.
think we,
It's the first one. If you refresh, is it not there? 2022 audited financials 1. So I'm on page 3. Then you can follow along with me. So, in regards to the debt limit, our long-term debt is the blue, the debt limit is the orange, and the gray is what's available. So you can see our debt limit has been climbing over the past 4 years, and we have sufficient debt available to be used by the town. And same thing with the debt service limit. Continuing on to page 4 now. So this is going into information about the non-financial assets, so that's tangible capital assets. Something worth noting in the year that our capital assets have increased by approximately 3.3 million. So that's actually 7 million additions due to Prosperity Park, less the 3 million in amortization. So the net of 3.3 million increase, which is important for the town to be making sure they're replacing assets at the same point that they're being amortized. In the last few years, we have been amortizing more than we've been replacing, so this is one of the first years that we're doing a good catch-up. So that helps us remain strong with those indicators that the government sends out annually, saying that we're on par, or in the green or red, as we have seen in the past. Other non-financial assets include inventory, prepaid, and land held for resale, so there's been little change with those year over year, and then the accumulated surplus, which we'll go into more detail as we get through here. So 2022 financial highlights, unrestricted surplus has decreased approximately 312,000. This is due to the reallocation of 1.49 million unrestricted to restricted capital as a result of prudent reserve planning by council, and 7.2 million was invested into tangible capital assets, countered by the 3.78 in amortization, and 626,000 was spent on the repayment of long-term debt. So moving on, we are going to go into the discussion of operations by functional area. So there's a nice summary in the next 2 pages, but then on page 7, you can see the breakdown of revenues based on area. So you can see that our net municipal taxes make up 39% of our net municipal revenue. Coming in second is planning and development. So this 25% revenue on planning and development is a bit skewed this year due to the ISIP grant and other grant funding that we've received for the Prosperity Park. So we've spent a significant amount of funding on building Prosperity Park, but we've also received a significant amount of funding. So that's why you see the 25% pie there. And then the next highest is utilities. Obviously, our utilities is one of our services that we actually charge user fees on. So utilities is up there at 10%. And general government, so that includes other grants from like intermunicipal grants, interest, other items such as that. So the next page is the expenses by functional area.
Can I just stop you there for a second?
You bet.
Just ask you? So, if we were to compare ourselves to other municipalities our size, when we look at revenues, the 1% that on our facilities that's anywhere in the norm, or what do you know?
I don't know anything specifically. It is really hard to compare because we don't always know how different organizations put into their different, so facilities, it depends how they account for it. So do they put administration and have the administration facility as part of administration, or do they have the facility as something separate? So we could do a deep dive into like comparing apples to apples, which would be the segmented financial disclosure that we have to submit into the government, which is the FIR. So I could do a deep dive into that, but it would definitely be a project to make sure that we had comparable data.
So when we're saying revenues, so like of all the money that the town brings in, 1% of the money we bring in is through our facilities.
Yes.
That doesn't compare to the cost of operating these facilities. Less, take that out, and we still have a 1%, because there's no way that's happening.
Yeah, well, and remember, there's only several facilities of ours that actually earn income. So our administration building does not have significant facility income. The facility revenue comes from the social center, the multiplex. We did have some rental at the new town hall, as it was called, and then the post office. Those are really our only facilities that are bringing in any revenue, as well as the RCMP detachment. We get rent revenue from that. So that's why it's only 1%, because
That's how small of it is.
That's how small that revenue relates to the
This doesn't
overall pie.
represent the cost of running those facilities and showing that after that's all paid, the revenue that's created is 1% over the cost. This is just revenue that the town brings in, and our facilities are responsible for 1%.
Our facilities earn us 1% of
For
total
the
revenue.
bills, before anything. Okay.
Yeah, so if you wanted to go for a deep dive into one specific facility, we can look at it. But our cemetery workshop, our airport, our materials recovery, our admin building, we have zero rent on them. We have zero other income for them. So those ones are a net loss at the end of the year. And that's why it's really hard to compare facility column in our statements to another, because other places may put the administration facility cost under general and admin. So it really depends on how they account for things in their silos.
I just want to let everybody know that that 1% revenue from facilities is not taking away what it costs to operate those facilities or debenture payments on those facilities. It's just of all the money that this organization brings in, the facilities represent 1% of that cash flow. Okay.
That is correct. So this is based on actual revenues for the year. So yes, they brought in 1% of our total revenue is what we brought from facilities. Onto page 8, we have expenses by functional area. So you can see this is broken down much nicer into the pie. So there is no the real winner is actually recreation, parks, and culture. So they also have our highest expenditures. But when you're thinking parks and culture, we're talking the visitor information expenditures, the grass cutting, all of those other services. So there's a lot of different things that are into each of these pies in this section here.
So which one is the Parks and Rec on the expenses?
It's the gray.
Oh, yeah, because we don't have any titles on ours.
We have community services, facilities, but
Oh, the gray one didn't come up.
Yeah,
Okay.
A couple of the others too. I'm seeing that as well.
So municipal services is the red one at the top, and that's 10%. The blue one at the top that's missing is general government, 13%. So protective services is there. The gray one is recreation, parks, and culture, 18%. And then you would have them all.
protected services is the RCMP costing.
RCMP as well as municipal enforcement, fire, and safety and emergency management. Yes, so the pie, our revenues are distributed and our pies are distributed much more evenly when it comes to expenditures. And then this is also revenues by source is page 9. So this is just a little bit different. So it shows our net municipal taxes is 39%. Do you guys have all the?
Yep.
Yep.
This one's
Okay,
good.
perfect. I'm not sure what happened with that one. I apologize. So net municipal taxes is 39%. User fees makes up 18%. As you had noted, those other comparable charts that I have given in the past, a lot of other municipalities, see, this is something we can compare easier. I think a lot of municipalities were in the 20 to 25, almost 30% range for user fees. So the town is still low on user fees. Operating grants make up 7% of our total revenues by source. Capital grants is 24%. So that is skewed this year because we do have that large ISIP grant. Franchise fees makes up 6%. Other revenues makes up 4%. Fines, licenses, permits, and penalties only 1%, and investment income 1%. So that was the 200 and some change that we got in investment income in the year.
On a typical year without that large ISIP grant, the capital grants usually run around 18%, 14 to 18% or something like that.
I think so. Let me just quickly. I can look at last year's quickly.
If that was the case every year, we'd be laughing at 24%.
Yes, the 24% is definitely skewed this year. Last year it was only 11%.
11.
And operating grants were 12%. But remember, that percentage is calculated based on, and actually municipal taxes was 46%. But this calculation is based on current year revenues divided by each of the silos. So those are the most significant. Last year, our user fees made up 21% of our total revenue. So our capital grants are skewing our chart slightly, but still comparable to prior years, or similar breakdowns. And then expenses by type. So we have salary, wages, and benefits, so that's 38% of our expenditures in the year, which is comparable to other municipalities, and actually comparable to last year, it was also 38%. Amortization expense, 19%, last year it was 18%. Goods purchased, 20%, also comparable to last year at 17%. Contracted services made up 14%, and the year prior was actually 18%. So the remaining ones are negligible differences from the prior year as well. So, and moving on, so the cash flow statement is, it's on page 5 of the financials. And as an accountant, I can tell you that I dislike cash flow statements and trying to read them. So some of the highlights of it are our town's cash and cash equivalents increased by 670,000 in the year. So we're at 7.3 million overall cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year, compared to 6.6 million in the prior years. So increases in cash also due to deferred revenues that we've collected and are carrying forward for projects that are not completed at the end of the year, as well as we had that significant increase in investment income, and that compounding every month, that makes a big difference for us too. So other highlights on the cash flow statement is we spent 7.19 million on acquisition of TCA. In the prior year for capital, we only spent 4.4 million. So it's nice to see that our purchasing of capital is higher than our amortization, and actually significantly higher this year. So that will help our capital ratios. Next page is the changes in accumulated surplus, which we went over with those other highlights that I had. On page 11 of my summary, we have the assessment history 2018 to 2022. So you can see our assessment is very much unchanged from the prior year. There is the overall taxable assessment has declined from a high of 774 million in 2019 to 702 million in 2021 and 2022. So we've decreased 9.3 between 19 and 21, but 21 and 22 we've remained stable. So I think we're done and we're on the way up again, hopefully, but only time will tell.
What factors weigh into this?
The factors that weigh into this is completely out of our control, because we have our municipal assessor assess our residential and non-residential, and then we also have the provincial assessor that assesses the designated industrial properties, as well as like the linear, so like railways, pipes, and like power poles. So
again, we have no input into
none.
these numbers. Okay.
And we don't know these numbers when we're doing budget. If we knew what the assessment was when we were doing budget, we could do different scenarios, and maybe this year, because there was a decrease, we could go and maybe increase our tax revenue an extra a little bit more, so that it could be a slight increase to the taxpayers. But until we know the assessment and then the requisitions that we receive in the new year, we really don't know what our tax rate will be until this comes in. So overall, relatively unchanged from the prior year. Page 12 has some statistical financial information. We really haven't had any significant changes from the prior year, so that I will leave with you. Our vulnerability indicators measure the degree to which the town depends on other levels of government for operating funding. So you can see our vulnerability went up this year to 30.8%. This is largely skewed by, once again, Prosperity Parks. So I just wanted to make note of that. And then the last page, page 13, is where the tax dollars are spent. So this one I find interesting as well. Relatively unchanged from the prior year. So does anyone have any questions?
Did the provincial education portion increase from 2021?
No, that's the one that decreased. So in 2021, there was a large increase to our requisitions that we actually didn't even budget for. So what had happened, actually 2020 is when this happened. So in 2020, we under levied our taxpayers the requisition, and it was significant. I believe it was $30,000. So then what happens when there's a significant under levy? We actually have to book the receivable from the ratepayers. And so in 2022, we collected the additional funds plus an additional, it was $33,009. So that's why we're seeing a decrease significant in our tax bylaw, because last year we had the increase plus the catch up from the 2020 increase. So that's why it's actually lower this year. But yeah, this year we received a statement of intent on April 11th. So that is the most current and up-to-date information that we have.
Everybody get that on the provincial education side? We didn't know till late in that budget year, and it ended up, had to collect more property taxes just to catch up on that, so.
And the same thing happened with the Minburn Lodge the prior year. I think it was an additional $1,000.
Okay, no questions up to now? You're doing great.
Well, I've cut it down a little bit. Wild and Company also comes and does a presentation at the actual council meeting, so they can go into some more detail, like with the notes and everything like that. These are the highlights that council really needs to know, because these spreadsheets like this are quite confusing and really can be manipulated many different ways as an accountant. So it's nice, like the pie charts are
I
very.
think there's laws for accountants. Manipulate.
No, but it's just with the way that things,
Exactly.
like the way that financials can be presented, it can kind of skew your opinion. So this year our cash position went up significantly. So, oh, it's great, the town's doing great. But I think in the year prior, our cash position went down. But we're probably in the situation where if Prosperity Park is completed this year, our cash position could go down because we have significant deferred revenues, which are grant funds that have been received for that project, specific to that project, that we know we're gonna spend this year. So then that money that we have in our account right now at the start of 2024, we may not. So it's not that we're doing poorly as a town if our cash decreases, it's just that we completed a project. So that's why sometimes that can get skewed when you're looking like, oh, cash decreased by 2 million, but
But our asset,
our asset would go up by 2. So that's what I mean. So if you look at any one item and compare it from last year, it's sometimes misleading.
based on what time the money was spent. Okay. So we will see this on Monday, and we're getting a presentation from our auditor on Monday.
That is correct. So they will.
Anybody have any questions before that, or anything that they need more information on?
And feel free to email me if there is something or phone me. If there is something this week, we can make sure that the auditors touch on it, or I can add a supplemental to my memo.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You still have one left. Transfers carry forward.
Oh, yes. 1 second. So this is the transfer to carry forward reserves. We do these annually. The topic is to transfer to carry forward operating reserve, and the proposal is to approve transfers to the carry forward reserve for use in 2023. Backgrounds. The operating capital funds have been set aside in the following reserves as part of the 2022 year-end process. These transfers from operating funds to reserve funds were not budgeted and therefore require council approval. They are contained in these financials that were presented to you, and so the expense going out to the reserve and then the income coming in from the reserve is already budgeted in 2023 budget. So these reserves have been accounted for as an expense in 2022 and a revenue in 2023. So they've already been accounted for everywhere. The financial implications of this is an expenditure of $799,150 will be recorded in the 2022 financial records to transfer unexpended funds for the departments listed below to the carry forward operating reserve for use in 2023. This number seems really large, but in the infrastructure planning and development, a significant portion of that is the ATCO franchise fee, or not the franchise fee, the ATCO investment for the invested lights. So any funds that we did not go over budget, any excess of those funds that we received were transferred to a carry forward reserve, and it will be brought into revenue over the subsequent years to count for any overages in budget due to the investment of those lights. So that's why that number is quite large for infrastructure. The remaining ones are all very comparable to prior years. The
If we go to Parks and Rec, so is that a project or a piece of equipment that hasn't been purchased yet?
yes.
So that, as we carry this forward, that money's gonna come back into this year's budget and be spent on the project.
And it's been budgeted too. So for example, in protective services, there's $5,000 that was meant for an AV upgrade at the station. That was not completed by the end of the year, or actually done by the end of the year. So we moved the funds into 2023. So a revenue and an expense is budgeted in 2023. So zero impact to the taxpayers, but then it allows us to carry forward some of these projects that were not completed by the end of the year.
Okay. So we'll see this on Monday.
Yes.
Need a motion on that. So any questions regarding the carry forward? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to go with CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And, so, in front of you today is the revised draft of the document presented to Council on April 4th, the Employee Policy Manual, and then an updated memo there too, which captures some of the changes that occurred in our one-on-one conversations there on the 13th, and then as well on the SMT meeting. Also with us today is the architect or the author of this document, our HR officer, Kaylee. She'll be doing a good bunch of the presenting here, but just before we roll into that, just a few comments leading into the document. This document is included in our foundational documents list that's been in front of council a couple of times here this year, and was identified as one of the main priorities for 2023, as several sections needed revision to bring them in line with various areas of employment legislation. In doing so, it of course made sense to evaluate the document as a whole and examine our overall offerings and guidelines for accuracy, consistency, reasonableness, and competitiveness in the marketplace. To give council an idea of the current employment landscape in not only Alberta but Canada in general, I submit to you a few facts as of today. There are 112 senior municipal positions listed on AB Munis and the RMA website as of today. There's 720 senior municipal positions listed on Civic Info, which is a national job advertising page for the municipal space in Canada. The province of Alberta as an entity has 164 jobs currently right now on their website. And if you do a job search on Indeed using just Alberta as the search criteria, 58,000 open positions come up. And if you expand that to be Canada as the criteria, a staggering 454,000 jobs show up on just that one website alone. This is what we're up against. That's our competition for talent out there in the marketplace today. So considering our number one goal of people and culture, we wanted to present an updated employee policy manual that was in line with that goal, and that is at the same time reasonable in terms of potential cost and scope for the residents and the taxpayers, all while still trying to position us as an employer of choice in a marketplace that literally has tens of thousands of employers who are in urgent need of people to do work. Now, you've all read the draft proposal and the associated memo, so I won't read that here again today. And just for the members of the public, they're available both on the agenda and on the website. In a moment, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kaylee, and we're going to go through the draft policy proposal section by section to confirm council's agreement with that section, which means at the end we should have a document that's the consensus of all of council. It'll be the sum of the parts, so to speak. But before I do that, I do want to emphasize that the draft proposal is exactly that. a proposal. The finished product will be your document, and we are, of course, open to discussing any changes that you see fit throughout this process. Nothing in this draft is etched in stone at this point. So, if there's no questions about the process or where we go, I'll turn it over to Kaylee and we can start in section 1.
Okay, so Kaylee, is this your first time addressing council?
It is, Your Worship.
For those of you who don't know Kaylee, her name is Kaylee, your MCO, and she's our Human Resource Officer. And she's been with the team how long now?
Since October 11th, 2022.
And great job on behalf of council. And I want to thank you for the amount of work that you've put in creating this document. I know that it's not easy and things are changing with provincial regulations. And again, I think we all understand what Chris brought up earlier, trying to attract people, good people to this organization. We need to be willing to go the extra mile. So please start.
Okay, so I want to thank everyone for their input and time they've spent reviewing the document. It is quite large. And I also want to reiterate what Chris was saying. So this is a collaborative approach, open to any suggestions, ideas. These are the ideas we're bringing forward. I welcome all of your ideas so we can create a really, really great document that's really easy to read for everyone. I want to reiterate to everybody as well that this document is to really showcase who we are as a municipality, the way we expect our employees and ourselves included, how we conduct ourselves when we do business rather, and our expectations as an employer. And just to refer this as a, a friendly, easy to read user guideline of, when they have a quick question, they can just look it up right away. So with that being said, we'll start at section 1.1, the welcome. So what has been added here, so again, what I just mentioned, kind of standards of how we conduct ourselves. So I included in there as well our vision, mission, and key organizational values. Those were missing before. So I think those are really important to have when a new hire or current employee looks. They can see that right away. Very easy to read. They don't have to hunt for it. The rest is not changed a lot in that section. So do I just go on to the next section? Is that how we're going to do it? Or?
Yeah, how would you like to do that, Your Worship? Do you want to just pose to council any concerns with that? And if there's none, then we'll move on to 1.2 and so on and so forth.
I think whatever works for
Yeah.
Kaylee, it's whatever your style is. I mean,
Yeah.
you've had some input from council now. We've all
Yeah.
gone through the document. So if you want to highlight what you feel is important
Yeah,
enough
'cause
to bring forward, that's good.
Yeah, because not every section, there wasn't significant changes. All the grammar changes have been made, unless we've missed some, but they should all have been made. So I'll skip over section 1.2 and 1.3, so that is corporate structure and role of the employment standards legislation, because nothing was touched on there. So going into definitions, so section 1.4, what we did there under family members, so immediate family members and just family member, was reduce some of the redundancy. So it was a huge long section before, so we just kind of consolidated some of the definitions, got rid of some repetition. We added seasonal employees and temporary employees definitions because there was some confusion I noticed in and amongst our staff of what it meant to be temporary, what it meant to be seasonal, so just clarifying those as well. Any questions about anything so far? No, good, okay. So section 2, employment, hiring of employees, 2.1. No significant changes there. 2.2, hiring of relatives, nothing was changed there. 2.3, nothing was changed. And then we get into 2.4, probationary period. So what we proposed in this section was trimming down the probationary period from 6 months to 3 months to be more competitive in the marketplace, but also from a legal standpoint, 3-month probation is kind of what the going standard is for that. We'd run into some issues if we tried to uphold a 6-month probationary period. We'd still owe, according to employment standards, we'd still owe them their 1 week's or 2 weeks pay, depending on how long they've been employed. I think it'd be 1 week's pay. So that's why that was proposed to be changed. Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, I did, I read the note on the other piece on that, and, totally get what we're saying with the 3 month, but I had noticed on the other note, it sort of said that within that time period, rather than just extending it, somebody should know whether they're the right fit for the job. I'm just wondering, is there any process for which that could happen? Only for sometimes, I don't know if it's about fit, but given what could be going on in circumstance, we may not have had somebody have the ability to be doing something right within their project. Now, I understand we would still end up paying for a 1 week or a 2 week for sure. Although to me, 1 week or 2 weeks pay is really nothing when we're looking at an opportunity to really assess somebody. So that was my only concern is I understand the manager shouldn't be able to just extend, but is there a process that we could look at an extension at all?
Like you said, we would have to, you know, probably pay that 1 week, 2 weeks still per employment standards. I mean, we could technically call it a probationary period, but it really wouldn't truly be one, if that makes sense.
If somebody was to be let go in that gap between what would be after the 3 month to the 6.
Yeah.
So you're saying that
There'd
really
still be a
we
week's
would
pay.
only have that 1 or 2 week pay. It really wouldn't change what they'd be paid out.
Yeah, so, so 0 months to 3 months, it's no payment, and then going on after 3 months, it's 1 week's pay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're basically looking at that it really wouldn't change it other than, because they.
Yeah, we just have to
Okay.
pay them.
Yeah, that was my question. I wasn't sure if over and above the 1 to 2 weeks, it also meant something additional that they could claim. Because there are certain times where it's somewhat unfair because we've maybe had a big project going on and we haven't allowed that new person coming in to have really shown what they could do. 3 months can go super fast at times, so, but that makes sense. Thank you.
So I do have a question,
Yes.
Kaylee. So is there a process at 2 months, 18 days where you sit down with their direct superior and we have a conversation about their performance levels and what we feel the potential may be or something like that?
Yes, absolutely, that should be happening. And the employee should be getting a performance evaluation done before they hit the 3 month mark, so that they really can understand how they are doing. So it shouldn't be a surprise when that 3 months comes. There should be no surprises, so to speak, so.
CAO
Yeah,
Leggett.
thanks, Your Worship. I was going to just sort of emphasize that's a process we are doing now too. That
I was trying to put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
there's a pre-probationary period employee performance review that's taken place now to have exactly that conversation. So, and it you know, we're sort of speaking from the employer side of the table, but it's also to have a similar conversation with that employee to say, is our job what you thought it was? Is it working for you? Are the expectations there? And just have that mutual conversation. But absolutely, that's happening now. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with Councilor Riddick and then Councilor Curtis.
Thank you for clarifying. This is one that, the document that you circulated before explained why we needed to change our approach to this, and this is something that we've sort of been familiar with. You used the term should be conducting a performance appraisal, but is it actually happening?
Yes, they are actually happening, yes.
Okay, and then I guess my question would be, if there is a lag in the process, that would again feed into our HR increased awareness and encouraging each of the department heads, their managers, and subsequent team leads to be able to do this, because we do have a large organization and we're going to be ramping up the number of employees. So I'm just hoping that there's some way to be able to keep on top of that as we continue to hire and want to make sure that we're making good hires as well as providing feedback. So there's a capacity to be able to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been done in the past. Usually we'll receive a letter from the manager saying after the fact that they have done this review. I'll get a copy of the review saying that so-and-so passed their probationary period and go from there.
Okay, do you want to speak before Councilor Curtis? Okay, Councilor Curtis.
Thank you. I'm just wondering too, on the evaluations, do they take into account feedback from employees in that work group that work with that person?
Yes.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Worship. Yes, that's something that Kaylee's looking at implementing, and that's the 360-degree feedback performance review process. We're baby stepping into that right now, but it's something we're hoping to get
So
to.
What I did was, with our professional development reviews we did this January, I did kind of a pilot project with just the management level staff, kind of feedback to see how it went. There was some good feedback. There was lots of hesitancy. So 360 was from, you know, let's say manager, for example. So it was from some staff, some peer level managers, upper managers, to kind of give the full picture of how they interact with everyone. I found it too daunting of a task to do it with every single individual starting, but it's something to look into in the future, for sure.
Okay, Director Saskew?
I just wanted to comment on the performance reviews at the 3-month mark or the 6-month mark. Those have always historically been done because those are necessary for our payroll. In the past, what was payroll, to register them for benefits. So that was like the one hard, they need to have a sign off from a manager saying that they have completed their probationary period. And there also has been instances where someone, like Tanine, Councillor Rawawa had mentioned, that they were maybe struggling a little bit, or they had a project. They have had their probation extended. Obviously, we would still be repercussion if they weren't continued on with their services, that we'd have to pay the 2 weeks or the 3 weeks or however long they were on. But we have extended probations in certain circumstances, knowing that we would have to pay out based on Alberta labor standards. But when you extend the probation, then they don't go on the benefits at the same time. So that has been done in the past, and that was the one hard, they had to have that review done before they could go on benefits. And employees make sure that gets done.
Okay, before we talk any more about benefits, there's another section here that covers
Yes.
benefits.
Yes.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
yes, we took out the talking about once you're done your probationary period, you're eligible for benefits. In the benefits eligibility section, then it talks about at 6 months, you'll be eligible for benefits.
Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Bullock now.
I guess I would definitely think somebody that's on a 3-month probation, I would definitely think we would like to have a sit down with them previous to that 3 months coming up,
Yes,
just in case a corrective action is required, or even just to reinforce what they're doing is good. So I would like to see that going forward and have that written in stone.
I will add that is in our professional development or performance review section. It does mention in there at the 3-month mark, you will receive that review.
Okay, Councillor Barry?
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I want to say it's a great document. You put a lot of work into it, and I really appreciate it. Mine on this one here, I was trying to determine, is the reviews conducted by twice per calendar year, or is it based on their employment, their commencement period?
So it's twice per calendar year, so we're proposing January and July of every year, and then the additional review when they're done their 3 months.
Regardless of what month they commence?
Yes.
Because, I mean, if you commenced,
Yeah, there could
if
be
you
some
commenced in
flows.
May, then 3
Yeah.
months later would be your first
Yeah.
review.
So that's taken into account. So, you know what I mean? It's more so it would be goal setting, you know, that sort of thing, than a full blown review, so to speak. So if you had one, you know, you just started and it's only been 3 months, like I am working on these goals, but still have that conversation is still happening for
So
sure.
then after that, then it would
Yes.
be twice a year,
Yes.
kind of at set times.
Yeah, going forward.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that with the explanation here today and knowing what the rules are really from the government of Alberta and employment standards, that we will be at a 3-month probationary timeline on new hires, and the conversations will take place, the evaluations and goal setting moving forward. So this section, everybody's okay with right now? Okay. Carry on.
Okay. Sorry, 2.5. I don't think there's any changes there. Competing or alternative employment, and 2.6 working hours. All that will be in there. Offer of employment, nothing's changed. Breaks haven't changed. 2.7. So the earned day off 2.8 EDO program. So what I added there was to do, so more of a definition. So employees who work 35 hours per week will be eligible to take every 3rd Friday off. Employees who work 40 hours per week will be eligible to take every 4th Friday off per month. Employees will be scheduled in a different earned day off team to ensure that not everyone's gone at the same time. That was not mentioned before, so the addition of that. Any comments on that one? Yes,
Start
Councilor.
with Councillor Bullock.
Just a question, I don't know much about the earned day off program, obviously, so what is this exactly what it was like before, the third Friday off for
Yes.
35 hours and the 40 hours for every fourth Friday off?
Yes, correct.
Why the difference between the two?
Megan, do you want to, sorry, Director Sasky, do you want to speak to that?
I can speak to that. So it's based on the workday. So the 35-hour workday staff get paid for 7 hours a day, work 7.5 hours per day, and if you look at the 3-week period, it equals exactly 7 hours. So the Monday to Friday in the first and second week at half an hour, then the Monday to Thursday in the third week at half an hour per day equals exactly 7 hours.
14 days at 0.5 per day.
Yeah, so that's the third Fridays, and then with the 40-hour work weeks, I think they work an extra 0.25 per day or 0.15 per day, 15 minutes a day, and then add that up over the 4 Fridays. That equals exactly 8 hours. So that is why there's the discrepancy, but it has been.
Tell us how the employees make up this per day, this half an hour a day, or
Well,
like, when is that? Do they come to work early? Do they stay late? Or
Well, actually, our office hours technically for what we get paid is 8:30 to 4:30, and 7-hour staff come in at 8. So our office is open at 8, and so we work 8 till 4:30, but get paid for a 7-hour workday.
any questions? So everybody's at work half an hour before we open.
We're actually at work an hour before we open. Our front doors open at 9.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, say the hours one more time. I have to write things down because apparently I can't hear anything.
In the contracts, the working hours are 8:30 to 4:30, so that's when you get paid your 7 hours with the 1-hour break. So that's the 7 hours per day, but you're expected to be at work from 8 till 4:30, which is your half an hour.
In order to qualify for the program.
And the 40-hour work week, so it's 7:45 to, is it 5?
5.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the 15 minutes between 7:45, and they are all expected to be there at 7:45 because I believe their safety meetings occur right at 7:45. So even our summer students, we pay a little extra hourly just so that they can attend all the safety meetings.
And they have a 50-minute lunch as opposed to an hour lunch in that schedule.
Okay, everybody understands,
So I just have a question.
sure.
Again, this is not a complaint, this is just an overall question there. So understanding that they have a 1-hour lunch, what is our requirements for giving lunch? And the only reason I'm asking this is this actually, why I ask the hours, it very much mirrors hours that I face in an office, right? Now, we don't look at it as somebody putting in an extra half an hour, even though we also ask them to be in at 8 when the doors open 8:30, because we give them a paid hours lunch. And we've always been told that actually you only have to give them a paid 30 minutes lunch. So actually they already are getting 30 minutes. Is that fair to say? And I don't have a problem with us looking at it that way, but that's how we've looked at it. Or am I looking at it kind of wrong?
Get unpaid lunch.
Yeah, an hour
Okay.
unpaid lunch.
Yeah, so there's the 15-minute breaks that you get,
Yeah.
and that is, they
That's
get
labor
50-minute breaks, but our hour lunch is not paid.
Okay. And so there is nothing required, a paid period for lunch? Like say by Alberta labor laws? That was my question.
Because we provide the 15-minute breaks.
Because you do the 15-minute breaks. Okay.
Okay, so everybody's under full understanding how this EDO works and the hours that they're working. So coming in a half an hour earlier, hopefully it's very productive time for all the staff. Okay, it's a very nice benefit to have. I hope that all the staff appreciates that, because it's not really common in the workplace to have this, so.
It actually is, Your Worship. We've done some.
Okay,
some
let's say
looking
in
at
the real world. Let's say other than, government type of positions and stuff, people that are out there every day creating, go ahead.
In fairness, we wouldn't have that. So it's not in all government positions. Because I want to be clear, we have to have the employees understanding this is 12 holiday days then a year.
Yes.
So they're getting 12 extra days.
Nope, it's not holidays,
Well,
Councillor
it
Warwick.
is by my standards. I'm
The
going to
staff's
tell you, I'm
work-
not
the
sure how I
staff's
feel
work-
about this.
And that's one of the misconceptions about that program, is they're not
But-
holidays, the people are working for it.
Okay, so you and I definitely don't see the same on that, Chris. We're definitely going to state that. I do see it when you're giving 12 extra full days and we talk a half an hour. I mean, there's some of it there. So let's just be honest, they're getting 12 additional days that they're gonna access at some point during the year. That's still accurate.
Okay, go ahead, Counselor Curtis.
Just like to say, people and culture is top priority. This is a very good perk. This is a good way to bring people in to the business that want to stay. So let's just all
You
remember
need to
that.
understand it's a perk, though. That's my point. I don't feel we get a lot of recognition for that.
And I wouldn't know either way. I don't have anybody saying we don't like it, or I haven't heard anything on the matter. I just want to say that it's good for the reset of the mind. It's good to know that that's coming forward, and it's a good perk to bring people into the business. Good, talented people that want to stay.
And I'll just add that lots of different workplaces might not have, let's say, an earned day off program, a flexible work hour. So you start at 7, you're done at 3. Or I know I've worked in the private sector, you start at 7:30 till 5, but then every single Friday, you get every Friday afternoon off. So these things are happening in different industries. And yeah, so there's lots of different ways you could slice it. But
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody is under full understanding how this works, and on the 40-hour and the 35-hour work weeks that they're compared.
I do now.
Okay,
perfect.
thank you. Let's move forward.
Okay, so section 2.9, overtime policy. So we got rid of a paragraph that was redundant, saying the same thing over again essentially. We got rid of the non-union wordage. That didn't need to be there. Thank you, Counselor Barry, for catching that. And the other thing that we did add is a maximum for banked overtime hours. So it says overtime, so it would be D, so overtime will be banked hour per hour as per employment standards and can be banked to a maximum of 40 hours. So that's the new addition there. Yes, Counselor.
Okay, Counselor Bullock, go ahead.
What was the maximum banked hours before?
There was none. Was there, Megan? Sorry, Director Saski.
I can add to that. So we were always going by the Alberta Labor Standards default. So recently that changed so that after 6 months, we could force an employee to take it or get it paid out, but there was no max hours per se. So now they will be able to earn up to a maximum of 40 hours in their bank. Anything they incur over 40 hours will be paid out on the next paycheck. And then after 6 months of expiry, so if they've had that in the time bank for more than 6 months, we as the town under labor standards are actually required to, so to say, pay that out or make them take it if they want to take their time off.
Question. If we make them take it, how would that work? Like, theoretically, if we hit that spot and they have to go, is it like they could take it over a course of a time, or would it be they have to take it like immediately? What does that usually entail?
We don't have a large problem with that. There's a few select individuals, and they know when their overtime is coming up. Director Lefebvre's department is the one that incurs more overtime, and the staff there that do the timesheets for them are very on top of it and let those employees know when they're starting to get close to 6 months bank. For the most part, it's not a large issue at our organization.
Counselor Curtis.
Thank you. Do we see any issue, or we had any issues in the past where, or what is our, I guess, policy on, you bank it up to 40, you use 20. You bank it up to 40, you use 20. You bank, like, did we ever see that? Is that an issue where, because technically you're going to be, you could bank 80, 100, whatever in a year.
And like,
Take that as vacation within that year.
there are controls on how an employee earns overtime. We don't have an issue with people earning excessive overtime. There's not been many of those issues in recent years that I'm aware of. And looking at the year-end audit numbers, we don't have significant overtime banks. Most of our accrued liability for employees is vacation time, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so the maximum of 40 hours is written into this policy, and after the 40 hours, then there'll be actions to be taken. Okay? No other questions? Move ahead.
So, no other changes in the overtime policy of 2.9, 2.91, or 2.92. 2.10, there is no changes. And then leads into 2.11, which is performance evaluations. So this is where it talks about performance reviews are conducted twice per calendar year with the exception of a review at the end of your probationary period. Your manager will schedule a time with you to discuss your performance. So we talked about that earlier. All good?
Any questions? Counselor,
Yes.
go ahead.
I guess the concern I would have with this statement is that a manager who may have 10 or 11 direct reports, I don't know how it fits, but to schedule an employee to do a probation or a review, and then 6 months later to schedule to do a review again, you may find that you may not get them done in time before the next review is supposed to be done. It's just it may be a challenge to have 2 reviews unless you, and I don't know how many managers have the direct reports under them, but it could be a challenge.
And I guess it's something that we'll see moving forward, right?
Yeah.
To see how manageable it is, and certain departments may have a lot more people to go ahead. So we'll go to Councillor Rudick first.
So further to Councillor Lemko's question, prior to you being here, Kaylee, one of our concerns was ensuring that managers and those that are in roles that would be performing performance evaluations would be given the support as well as the capacity to be able to deliver those messages, because I'm not sure that we've been encouraging a culture that has that in place. So is there some method or mechanism to be able to encourage that as well? Because that would be separate from HR policy. That would be more a practice encouraging professional development and such.
Yeah, so my goal with this is, it says performance reviews in here, but it's professional development reviews essentially. So you're sitting down with your employee, where do you want to be? How do we get you there? What kind of training can we do? In my mind, anything performance concerns should be addressed immediately or as they're happening. So we really kind of want to separate no surprises, so to speak. So when you go in to sit down for that professional development review, performance review, that you come to the table not shocked that your manager thinks you're doing a horrible job. Like, those conversations should be ongoing throughout the year. But this is more so that time to sit down and, realign, making sure your team's focused on the same goals. So when council comes and gives their strategic plans and initiatives, that it funnels from the director, department manager into the staff below, so that everyone's on the same page. So I do think those twice a year check-ins, just to make sure everyone's headed in the same direction, are great. As far as performance concerns, like I mentioned, they should be happening ongoing throughout the year. It shouldn't be that one meeting that you sit down and give an employee feedback of how they're doing in their role. Yeah.
And do you feel
Follow-up.
only one question? Oh boy, that is.
I
a
encourage
pickle.
the follow-ups.
Thank you. I
Yes.
really enjoy a lively discussion. So
Yeah, me
questions and
too.
answers are great. So do you feel like our managers that are going to be performing these discussions have enough training themselves to be able to do it? That's really where my concern is. If we're going to be, we're elevating, we're lifting our game. Is everybody able to do that? Are we getting there to be able to do that?
At the beginning of the year, for our first quarterly management meeting, I had a training session with all of our managers and kind of the higher level staff to, go through, to be aware of biases, what the 360-degree feedback means, go through the evaluation form, all that kind of stuff. So they have had that basic training, but I would hope that all of our managers have had some sort of management training, and if they haven't, please take some. Would be encouraged. Yes.
Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Yep, thanks, Your Worship. And just to follow up on that, Councillor Rudick, and I think you guys have heard me say this before, that we've got a lot of very competent managers in our organization, people with good boots on the ground experience. But my experience with that, working your way up the corporate ladder, has often been that, you get rewarded for tenure and job performance, and then you're great at what you do, and all of a sudden you become a manager. And the expectation is that by osmosis, just by, some mechanism, that now all of this employment and labor relation, important stuff is just known. And a lot of organizations don't really focus on training that. And a lot of people who aspire to be managers don't necessarily focus on that too. One of the goals of the HR role was to offer that to the managers as we progress through that process, so that when they're finding themselves in those areas where they now have to do not necessarily that boots on the ground issue management, but the employee management, that there's somebody with the appropriate credentials and knowledge to be able to lean on and have those conversations.
And I will add that I'm happy that the managers have reached out to me when doing these reviews. I coached some how to give some feedback. I sat in on some of the reviews that were a little bit trickier, so that was great to see as well.
Good, so you do have some input,
Yeah.
watching what they're doing.
Yeah.
Counselor Barry's first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I'm seeing this a little differently just right now. I was hung up on the word performance, evaluations,
Yes.
et cetera.
So we could change that to professional
well-
development review.
I was just going to say in my previous life, I would have a performance evaluation at the end of the year based on my accomplishments for the year. But my director always wanted to know, almost quarterly really,
Yeah.
how was I doing? Was I on schedule? Is there anything new that has come up that might be delaying me on something? So I was reporting to him as to where I was at for the what was to be accomplished for the year. But the performance was only actually done at the end of the year. So I was just trying to, now I'm sort of seeing this, it's not really that a performance review is being conducted
Yes.
twice in a calendar year.
Yeah. So,
So I like your idea of whether it's professional development or whether it's just an update.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure, those check-ins.
Okay, Counselor Bullock.
And I just want to make sure that the managers are going to be mandatory to get that training?
Like mandatory for them to get management training?
Yes.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure with our current managers, what type of training, Chris, maybe you could speak to that?
Yeah, there's nothing on the books right now, Councillor Bullock, that would compel somebody to, or us to force somebody into management training. I think, with that goal of people and culture, through this process, individuals that we identify might want to move up the food chain and aspire to managers themselves. We could definitely have that conversation with them and perhaps support them in taking some of that training to get there. But there's nothing on the books right now that says, oh, your title of manager, therefore you have to take this. It's not a thing right now.
Yeah, because I would want to make sure that a manager that's going to be looking over a staff and stuff has the actual proper credentials to actually deal with personality traits and conflicts resolution instead of not having no experience going in there and making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So,
In our recruitment process too, when we're doing positions for managers, we're looking for a solid background of experience doing it as well. So, yeah.
okay, I just don't want to make sure that slips through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as long as you understand.
I understand.
That right now, there's no requirement for a manager at any level in our organization to have this type of training. But I would imagine during the interview process that we would bring the questions up that we would get answers for about, are they qualified to handle people? And then again, there would be evaluation on a manager too, and you would sit in on their evaluations of their employees and stuff, so.
So it's everyone in the organizations are getting these reviews, so directors, managers, everyone's receiving one.
Don't have to apologize. Question.
Well, I think maybe, and council's strategic goal was to put an increased emphasis on people and culture, and I think maybe this is kind of reversing or inverting what we've sort of approached it in the past, and I would hope that if we have managers, for example, that don't have the strength or the requisite knowledge to be able to do this type of evaluation for others, would in turn be saying that about themselves when they're getting their reviews. So I would hope that we're all humble enough to be able to recognize that we're not perfect and that we are continually growing and learning the skills that we need. And as an organization, that we would be providing that support so that if there are managers that require some additional training, that they can access that, and it would be a culture that would be
Yeah,
continually evolving and growing. Just because I spoke with a CAO for another municipality that has been working with the municipal internship program, and it has been like transformative for the rest of her staff, not just for her and the intern that's working with them, but it really has leveled up the game for everybody that works there, just with that new infusion of,
Yeah.
I don't want to just say, it's that different perspective coming into an organization has really changed the way that they approach things. So anyways,
an example would be for succession planning. If we know we have a great internal person that wants to, develop and grow into a manager, to make sure that they do go for that manager training before we just throw them into a role, so to speak, that might have been done in the past. But, you know, making sure they are educated in all these different areas before they get that opportunity to move up. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome.
National Volunteer Day, thanks for volunteering.
Okay.
Oh, I want to add, it's paid on call. They're not volunteers.
They're paid on call.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we're good with that. Everybody's fine. Oh, go ahead, CAO.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just watching the clock here. I just need to let council know that Kaylee's got to call it quits at 4:30 here due to some personal considerations, so we might have to circle
Is
back.
there any, let's move to the highlighted ones and we'll.
Okay, job descriptions aren't changing. 2.13, promotions, transfers, and vacancies. I know there's been a lot of questions and comments in the past about this area. So, with that being said, I think the wordage I changed here is when a vacancy occurs in any department, the notice of the vacancy shall be emailed and posted as soon as possible on all department notice boards. So in order for that I'm just reading that now.
In order that employees from all
Yes,
departments
thank
may
you.
have the opportunity of applying for the position, the notice of vacancy must be posted for a minimum of 5 consecutive working days. And this was the one that, that I think caused the discussion there last time. These positions may be advertised externally with the posting. So our minimum requirement is to advertise anything internally. But then externally is an option there as well.
And I think
Who makes that determination?
Yeah, so right now it's happening between HR, myself, and the department head. But I think there's a couple of different levels of hiring that this is sort of meant to address. One would be, that promotion. So we've got an individual that's due for a title upgrade, for example, ready for that next level. They've been at a particular job for a while. We have a need for it. So that would be something, of a straight promotion. There's no job advertisement. It's for this individual. We're assigning them more responsibility and a bigger title by definition. Then we've got, a vacancy in a position where somebody leaves for whatever reason, retires, moves on, terminated in the worst case scenario. Then there's an opening. Depending on where our succession planning conversations are with that particular role, we may have had somebody that we've identified waiting in the wings that we've made loose or perhaps even firm commitments to, that when this person retires, you're the obvious candidate to ladder into that job. So that would be one of the instances where we don't necessarily want to go externally, because we've already had those conversations and those commitments, and in fact we've been coaching that employee to be taking on that next position. If we went externally with that, what that would be communicating to that person is that, we've had perhaps years of conversations about you going into this role, but just before we make that decision, we're going to go out to the marketplace and see if there's anybody else that might want it. It makes that whole succession planning conversation really difficult. So that would be an instance where we actually don't go externally, that we say we're going to post it internally, and Harry, Susie, whatever person, we encourage you to apply to confirm you're actually interested in it. So we do make the person actually go through the formal process of applying, so we can get their credentials, their resume, all of that stuff. And then there's the case where, that same vacancy occurs, or even we've got a brand new position that's been approved through council. HR would be a prime example of that, where we say, nobody internally that we've identified or had that conversation or has really expressed an interest. We're going to go out to the full marketplace, internal and external, and see who might come to the table. So those are the 3 situations we're trying to address with promotions, transfers, and vacancies.
Okay, Councillor Barry.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. The one question that I was having, though, is do we actually have a policy that deals just with hiring and succession planning? To sort of spell that out to us, or should it be in an employee manual? I'm just trying to figure out the aspect, even so that council is more aware of employees that are kind of being groomed into the future.
Yeah.
So that, I was just wondering if there is any thought of that actually
As it is
Finding
right
this.
now, it's 2.13 that's meant to address.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought.
Yeah.
All right, I'll leave it at that for now.
Sufficiently loose, broad language that allows senior staff to make that decision and make that call for that particular position, but, yeah.
Okay,
we can look at.
is there, oh, sorry.
So that totally makes sense. Your number one, obviously, for promotion, because there has to be someplace to go. I don't think that there has to be a lot on that because you guys are the ones doing the performance evaluations. You know if they need a title change. So to me, that one's really simple. It's the number two one that is the one that started last time. I'm still on that spot where I get 100%. We don't want to impact employee where they're not feeling valued and that they have succession. The only thing is history has shown that we have often not ended up necessarily with the correct person. And I'm always a little bit leery of, at some point you're passing it down. If you're moving people within, there's still a job opening somewhere that becomes, and it's kind of like we're shifting them around. We're still needing to advertise to bring some new person in at some point if we're moving around. And I'm like, have we automatically really put the best person we could have in that role? And I appreciate the succession planning, but we have had a lot of situations where people went in, I'll be honest, we've come back and said, how and why did that happen? So
And
that's my only concern.
yeah, and we can't necessarily go back and undo some of those issues that have happened in the past, but I think, in the last year or so that I've been here, I think there's only been one or two that we've even gone, that it was internal only. We've taken that step to cast that net, but what we don't want to, or what we'd like to not see in here, is that restrictive language that says in every case will go out, just because of the feeling and the perception to that person that we might be working with to move up the organization.
Councilor Rudy.
Sorry, I think I would agree with what my colleagues have just said. I think it's important that our staff feel valued and respected. And so I understand the sensitivity about that. But the other part of this is that this is a public entity in some senses. We have a fiduciary responsibility as governors on this side of the table to adjudicate the funds that we collect from our public and to demonstrate openness in a way that they will be aware of. And I think that's the other part of it that maybe is a difficult thing for us to express as council to administration at times, because there is a very real perception in the public that they have a desire to be able to see who or what is being advertised and what positions are being hired for, because they do feel a connection between the taxes that they pay, for example, in the conversation that we had previously, and the positions and the people that are hired. We understand that there are complexities, of course, in that arrangement, and as governors in this complicated relationship, we have a very specific role to play. But I would say that my encouragement would be, while this is a little bit general here, I would say that erring on the side of posting positions publicly is never a bad thing, particularly if you communicate that clearly with your staff, because what it does is it allows the opportunity for somebody that may not have been targeted, that may actually be somebody that is a diamond in the rough that would be interested, and or somebody in the public that we may not be aware of, and all the good work that we've done as a community to be able to build the number of people that are coming to our community means that we've got a lot of untapped talent potentially. At the same time, we want to still build that culture that supports our own staff. So just as a cautionary note,
Yep.
I think it's always good to be very transparent on how we do this.
And like I say, the overwhelming majority of them have been both internal and external concurrently, so that's the practice for the most part.
Okay, so we're gonna stop the conversation regarding this document, and we're gonna leave at 2.13 is the last comments,
Yep,
and we'll pick it up again at the next meeting.
sounds good.
So at this time, I'd like to call a 5-minute break, and then we got to get back to work. We got a lot of stuff to get through this agenda, so we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we will move forward. Welcome back. Okay, so we're gonna move over to Director LaFave, and we're going to hear about a request from a citizen in the town regarding a water meter. So I know it's a very long letter that you received, Director LaFave. So if you could just give us the highlights of what the situation is there at the Wawa residence.
Thank you, Worship. The writer is Kendall and Holly Warawa. The first paragraph, they talk about on February 23rd, 2023, they were notified by the town department of a possible leak, and that's because our meter system will pick up a high flow when we're doing our radio reads. My understanding is that when they went there, they were unable to find an obvious leak at that time. On March 1st, he was, our employee Carson Burnett was available to come to the house and check for leaks, and Carson was very thorough, and he checked the sinks, the fridge and things, and apparently there was no leaks detected. Then on March 9th, the writer received his first email water bill, which he says he likes, with a water bill of 73 cubic meters of usage, which is substantially higher than what his meter reading was prior, as the house was vacant. He does talk about, he went into the backyard and he had found a hose bib or a garden connection that was frozen but had leaked, and he had snowblowed some snow off of the backyard to see where some of the water had froze. In his opinion, what the meter is reading and what's there wouldn't be equal. Like he feels that the amount of water that went through the meter would have been more damage to the backyard than what's here. And he provides some examples of a 1 cubic meter tote to represent 1,000 liters, just to catch it in our heads. We did have our senior utilities manager, Jorgen Hussein, show up there on March 15th and had a look, and Jorgen went to check the fridges and things and couldn't really find anything, but wasn't sure about the boiler. He's not a plumber, but he knew that boilers use water in some capacity, but that was about the end of it, as he couldn't see anything obvious other than the leak outside. He compares then average water consumption, and he's correct. Average water consumption for a household of 4 is typically 20 cubes per month. A household of 2 is usually 8 to 10. So for an empty house, should really be at 0 or maybe just under 1 if there's minimal use. So in the writer's opinion, on the basis that there was a flow of 1.6 gallons per minute, that they couldn't identify what the leak was, that he would like the meter changed, and he's requesting to council that we take the water meter and change it with another water meter to see if that flow stops. Since that date, in March 15th, we've got the meter reads, and in January it was 401, in January it was 11 cubic meters, in February it was 73 cubic meters, which is a large consumption of water for sure. And in March, it was 1 cubic meter, and I had Carson drive out today and do a quick radio read as he drives by the house, and it's remaining for April at 0. There's no consumption.
Okay, so the request to change the meter, I don't really understand what would that prove? That it's reading exactly what it's reading right now? I mean, to change the meter and there's no water use at the house at this time, I don't like myself, the request doesn't make a lot of sense. If there was water being used in the house, then we could change the meter, but the house is still vacant, correct?
The house is vacant, correct, and it's now since March and so far in April is showing no consumption of water. I understand where the writer's coming from. If we're there and there's a flow of 1.6 and you think you've got everything turned off, the times we need to call a plumber to help us out with some of those appliances. We've found fridges with ice machines that will drain and leak. You don't know it's leaking and get a very large water bill. Boiler systems, we're not we're not professionals at boiler, we're not plumbers, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I know that's something that consumes some water at some point. I don't, obviously not these amounts, there's something was gone wrong. But the water outside would be a very obvious one to look at, and it is amazing how little of a water leak it takes to equate to many, many cubic meters of water. A running toilet, we've been through this as a council before, a leaking toilet downstairs that's pouring water of a tube the size of a pen will pour out 50, 80 cubes in a month, easy peasy. So it's not like someone dumped a swimming pool in one big pour in your backyard. It's just different. It's a slow leak that carries on and trickles on for a long time.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Rudick.
It would sound like, just like your worship was highlighting, I think maybe the request at the time of the writing of this letter might be different, that, given more current circumstances. We've talked about this in the past. Do we have a mechanism to be able to highlight if there are, in this instance, we've had some other vacant properties that have had some large spikes in water usage. Is there a way to be able to capture this? Because of course, it's not a perfect science, both on the homeowner as well as our own circumstances. I think probably it's wise for our staff to be helpful, but probably not to give advice. But in this instance, do we have a mechanism in our administration of the delivery of the bill to be able to catch something, or in this instance, it's too far gone to be able to notice? You know, it goes from 1 to 73 cubes. That's quite a drastic difference. Is there?
Actually, it went from nothing to 11 1 month, which would be something you would maybe notice
normal.
if it's always been 0, and then the next month it really went up to 73. Yeah.
Right. But we don't have a mechanism to be able to trigger an awareness.
Go ahead, Director Sask.
Thank you, Councilor Rudick. I can add to that. So in the letter, it actually specifically states, once it went up to the 73, our utilities clerk did notify them during their billing process. So once it, like, 1 to 11 isn't significant. There's lots of houses where if somebody was away for a month and the 1 to 11 didn't really trigger anything, because 11 cubes is very standard. Actually, I think 13 plus cubes is very standard for a household that is actually in use. So it was the next bill that it triggered that one.
Thank you. And because it wasn't read, that's helpful for the public to be able to know that too. But that's not always going to be the case, because it starts with a small difference and then it can turn to a large.
Go ahead, the CAO.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I think that what you mentioned a second ago, Councilor Rudick, that it wasn't read, and that's maybe part of the issue with the system. And correct me if I'm wrong. You know, we as an organization only become aware of these potential leaks once the read takes place. If we wanted to sort of monitor that daily, we'd actually need somebody out there physically present doing the reads on a daily basis, I believe. Because the meter system doesn't just communicate with town hall on a daily. Somebody's got to go around with the reading unit and actually capture it, and we don't have the staff power to do that, to try and catch leaks. It's not something that's in the cards.
We'll go to Councilor Warwick.
Sure. This is just in response to your worship to, like you said, about what would be the ask. I really think it is absolutely what Councilor Rudick said, based upon timing, right? This is my neighbor, and I want to state no relative, not my house, but same cul-de-sac. I actually did notice him the day I pulled in, literally snow blowing his entire yard to try and find this. And I can see where some of his frustration would come in, because there wasn't a big puddle. There was very little ice, no more ice than on my front. There had never been any catching or pooling at the bottom of the road at all. But at the time they would have gone, they wouldn't have had that March 0 or the most recent, right? So at that time there, I could see where somebody would say, well, if I've had somebody in twice, nobody's been able to detect a leak, maybe there is a meter problem, and that might be a question to say, can we change a meter? But I think these two readings would have come in potentially after the date of that. The only one question I had was, there was a concern when I was out there, and I just said, bring it in this, format, we can go there. But there was a concern that maybe there had been a little bit of a history with that house with the meter having some weird spikes in a couple intervals prior. Is there any way that we'd be able to look back and see whether they had, because it was sort of mentioned that they believed that the summer and fall, that twice there had potentially maybe been a couple of weird spikes. I'm just wondering if we saw anything there, but I really think it's a timing thing on this one.
Director Saskew.
I can comment from June until April of 2023, so June of 2022. And the water bills were basically the minimum bills, so 1 cube or less from September until December. And then in June and July, there was some consumption, but possibly watering plants, flushing toilets.
No huge.
No huge discrepancies, no.
Okay, so the request is to change the meter. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at the readings where we got here of the one in March and today's at 0. It certainly suggests to me that the meter must be functioning. It's not showing that there's a high reading still. And if it was malfunctioning, I can't see why it would go down to 1 and then down to 0 and stay consistent when during the months of summer, you said it was minimal, and then fall it was minimal. So I'm not really certain that I can see that the meter itself is malfunctioning at the moment, or it would still be reading wrong. And I don't believe that it's administration's job to monitor the meters in town on a daily basis. I believe that the purpose is to obtain a meter reading in order to be able to issue a bill for the water consumption of that month. I think that it's nice that the town was capable of notifying when they saw the drastic spike of 73. I think that's a service that we should be appreciating, that at least you can catch when something is really high and let a landlord or an owner know something. It still falls down to the aspect that if a vacant building is going to be sitting for a period of time, there is a valve that shuts the water off right at the meter so that there is no water going into the house. So I don't know. I don't see this myself. Thank you.
Okay. So the request was to change the meter. What we've seen in the history of water meters is that when they fail to 0. They fail to read. They don't fail backwards and go over. I've never heard of it. In your opinion, Director Lefebvre. So I don't know. I've had a flapper valve in a downstairs bathroom. We don't go downstairs a lot. That wasn't completely closed off due to a little bit of dirt. And I know what happened in that month's water bill at my place. It just kept leaking. So from the public works side, does it make sense to go out and change this meter? I mean, it's not going to prove anything if the meter is operating right now.
Again, I understand what the writer is trying to troubleshoot. Maybe at that time when he's convinced there's no water running through to anything and our water meter is reading 1.6 gallons per minute, mechanically it makes sense to take this one out, put that one in, and am I still reading 1.6? The process isn't just two nuts anymore. It's programming, it's tying that meter into the radio read system, which ties it into the Mint system. It still can be done, but our experience over these years is that the water meters, when they start to fail, they start giving you free water. They start reading less water. They allow water to roll through without picking up that the water's rolling through. So almost my career, that's the problem, is that when your meter's going bad, you enjoy it because your water bills are small, is what it typically is. But I can understand what he's saying. That's a good way to determine right at that second, is this still a problem? That does make sense. But now that we have no flows, if we still had flow and we couldn't find anything, I would go back and I'd be willing with a case like this to change the meters out, reprogram, and just for peace of mind that he can say, okay, they're both reading, then obviously I've got something going on. And just another word to say, and I'm not trying to be a sleuth or scientist or whatever, the day that the water flow stopped, this gives us a read of every single day of the water when the water started, the house started to consume water, which was January 27th, That's when the water started to come out and it was pouring out slowly, and it did that right up until February 24th, and Brianne checked out for me, and that was when the weather changed, and we got down to the lows of the -35s and -38s, so whatever's leaking in the backyard would have frozen stop at that point. This is maybe why when they come to check after, they couldn't find a leak, because it was already done. Not saying that's what happened, it's just a possibility, because you checked that out for me.
So then, there's an ask of council to change the meter. Is there, myself, right now, the meter's working, and we know, or at least I know, that any history I've had around water meters is that when they fail, they go to zero. Like, they go backwards. They don't go up. So does anybody want to entertain the idea of going out to change this meter? Because it's really, we're past the point where it's gonna prove anything at that moment. So I go ahead, Director Lefebvre.
I think in this instance, because we don't want to be running around to 2,500 different places and changing meters because somebody's upset with the water bill, this one does carry something behind it. If, I'm thinking that we could offer that if this starts to creep up again, because of the trouble he's had, and he's approached council, and there's water consumption, that maybe we could, if the problem persists again, now it's at zero, it's pointless to change the water meter because it's not flowing anything. But if it should start again, we could maybe change something to help them out if it starts to flow. It's just a thought. But not now.
Okay, so we'll correspond back to the rural office saying that this time we don't feel like changing the water meter makes any sense to us.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with that?
It's not flowing.
Okay, thank you. You got one more, Director Lefebvre?
I do. This is the proposed crosswalk. So the correspondence, I can read this one. Vegreville Town Councilors Justin Tina and Tanine, Town of Vegreville CO, Planning Development Director. This is from Lisa Jagolic. I reside in the cul-de-sac on the northeast side of Vegreville at 57A Avenue. There are a number of school-aged children, including my own, who attend St. Martin's School and walk to and from school each day. Sometimes they walk down the back alley and cross at the new crosswalk you placed last year along 56A Avenue, and sometimes they exit our cul-de-sac and across 44A Street. There's currently no crosswalk here. As my children are getting older, they go for walks and bike rides by themselves, particularly on the path at Sunrise Pond Park. Even as a family, crossing here is often risky because there's no sidewalk and vehicles either drive by or hesitate and cause confusion because they don't expect pedestrian traffic there. When we do cross, we usually race to the other side before any traffic approaches, which is especially stressful for youngest daughter when walking her bike across and needing more time. The Concalves family, who also reside in our cul-de-sac, have an elementary-age son who crosses at the same place to get to the sidewalk to St. Martin's School, similar to the crosswalk I signed to request last year on 56A Avenue. This is another area where our kids are forced to cross in the middle of the street as there is no sidewalk exiting our cul-de-sac leading to the nearest intersection. Myself and Patty would love for a crosswalk to be painted here so our kids have a safe place to cross when leaving our street to access the sidewalks and the black paths in our neighborhood. Attached is where we propose a sidewalk to be painted. It's a short distance from the corner. So if you go to the next picture, you can see her drawing that she submitted where she would like the crosswalk on 44A Street. And if you open the second attachment that I've provided, I just did an aerial of it, so it might be a little, so you get a look at the neighborhood because I wanted to discuss more of that. Make it a little bigger for you. So if you open up the attachment, the second attachment, and open it up, zoom it up a bit, you can have a look. That's where she would request the sidewalk. She's correct, in that cul-de-sac on 57A Ave, there is no sidewalks. And the reason there likely isn't a crosswalk there now is because you're making a crosswalk go from a sidewalk to a curb and some grass. You can get away with that in the summer, but then in the wintertime it does pose a problem because you're walking someone into a curb. And I understand they're walking down the street now as well. So that's just something to think about. A proper fix for this is to take on the corners of 57A Ave. If you look, you can see where the curbs are painted yellow. that's where you would put two chunks of sidewalk. You put a para ramp there, and then you would go crosswalk across the street to that side, and then join yellow to yellow, if you will, with another crosswalk. So they could walk down their street, which is quiet, and get on a para ramp, and then across the street and cross is to be the safest way to do it. Because I don't know if we're gonna roll in there and put sidewalks, and the request is not for sidewalks at all, but to put sidewalks in would be very expensive.
How did that happen, that we okayed a development where there was no sidewalk on either side of the avenue? I know you probably weren't in.
And either were you.
I know. I just find it funny. I mean, it's weird that sometimes we only see a sidewalk on one side.
Yeah.
But the okay development where there's no sidewalks on either side is a little strange.
It is, and
There's no sidewalks in mine either.
when they have the cul-de-sacs, at times when they have the cul-de-sacs that just butt in and stop and have a turnaround, a lot of times they won't because there's no traffic. So,
So if we were to go ahead with something like this, we would have to put a small section of sidewalk right there, close to where this crosswalk would be.
at a minimum, yeah. And then that homeowner of lot 20 would be responsible to shovel that as well.
Do you guys want to take this and get a price on what that would cost? There would be some signs on either side of the crosswalk that would have to be installed as well. A notification of a crosswalk. Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see some pricing on that, because, you know, safety of children is a big thing, so, in an area, but we should be looking at, what it would cost first.
I can kind of throw that out now if you want.
Okay.
If you're gonna, you should do a 10-meter para ramp on each one of those yellow portions of the curb and join them would be the best for the situation. So that with two para ramps, leave the existing curb face that's in front of house 32. Instead of para ramping that for now, we'll just leave it until it's cracked, needs replacement down the road, then we'll para ramp it. Those two sides, signage and crossing, and probably do it for about 10 to 12,000. It's the concrete, obviously, that's worth the money. And to do one side only, you can safely cut that in half.
Go ahead, Councillor Rudick.
So Dale, just to be clear, you're suggesting that the para ramp would be on both corners, or you're suggesting that if we did, can you explain that further
Lot
to
20.
be able to, yeah. So if it's going lot 20 to lot 32,
And then
that would
from
be the
lot,
10 to 12?
yep, no, from lot 34 to lot 20, and from lot 20 to lot 32
Okay.
is the best way to approach this. And no matter what side of the street you're walking on, you've got some place to cross. The minimum would be to put the sidewalk on lot 20, the para ramp, and then signs and paint the crosswalk across to the next curb.
Okay.
The one on 34, why I'm not suggesting we go from 34 to 33, if that makes sense, is because the crosswalk is gonna line up pretty much with his driveway.
And do you think the 34 to 20 connection is necessary?
It would be the best, but you can be safe with a minimum of putting it just on lot 20.
The traffic on 57A Avenue going into that cul-de-sac is not really the problem. It's 44A Street is the problem.
That's right.
When I drive down there, I mean, this is a very nice picture because there's not cars lined up both sides of the road there, which typically there is. I would imagine lot 32 would be very unhappy about their parking on the street because of the crosswalk there, but again, it's not they have a driveway, and this is about one parking stall not being there, but trying to find, and we know what happens here. They cross the road, then they go down to the new park, and then out they go and down the road, or they go down the other way to visit grandparents, you know, but go ahead.
Dale, and just, I should be your director of fave, sorry. I'm just thinking on that road, there isn't another spot on that one. This would be the only one that gets you across to the sidewalk side, right? Because there's
Correct.
a couple cul-de-sacs. Okay,
just to clarify, there is a crosswalk that's further north on 44A, but it does not connect
To there, yeah.
it does not connect to 57A, which is the issue, is that, and particularly that cul-de-sac has young children and young families that would be the ones that would need a safe crossing. And I guess at this point, maybe it's premature to say this, but I'll just ask for the sake of anybody that's watching, how many requests do we have to be implementing additional traffic calming or pedestrian safe crossings a year? How often do we have these requests?
We had one last year and we addressed it with a new crosswalk last year in the general neighborhood, and then one this year.
So it's not frequent, and I would say that on my time on council, this isn't something that we hear from very often. And there are some very busy intersections that have gone many years without having the appropriate marking, and we've put in some lights and some traffic calming to be able to facilitate. So I don't think this is a significant amount of money, but I do think the benefits might be there. I guess we have to take a look at whether or not that's an additional expenditure that we want to be responsible for this year.
Myself personally, living in that area for a long period of time, 44 A Street is not very children friendly at all. When you drive in there in the summertime and there's people parked everywhere, I mean, and to get to that sidewalk, we do have a new crosswalk just up the street that goes from the path, the new path that we put in, but still you have to access that by walking on the road. So leaving that cul-de-sac to have something there in place to get to the sidewalk just makes sense. So, what do you guys want to do?
I think it makes sense to put this expenditure in. And again, we talked about this previously, people and culture, but people also includes not only our staff, but the people that live in this community. So being able to link these families that have written to us to the facilities that we built out and improved last year seems like common sense. And if we're able to protect children in the process of doing that, that's money well spent, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Councilor Bullock.
Yeah, I'd like to see this go ahead, actually, myself, for the same reasons.
Okay, so we'll just bring this up on Monday for a council decision? And you're fairly, what?
I'm just wondering, on Monday, are we talking about doing just the section with the little piece or across or both?
I think the one will all would be needed here.
Yeah, okay.
Say from yellow to yellow. Is that right? Yellow.
No.
20 to 32.
Right. Yellow to yellow on lot 20. Or how long of a piece are we talking about?
Pair ramp on lot 20? The pair ramp on lot 20, sorry?
Yeah.
Just from the corner across?
No, the new pair ramp would be approximately 8 to 10 meters to get the swing, and then we just put the crosswalk in across the 32 and put some signage up.
Go ahead, Councilor Rudy.
So because this is a new feature or a new project, would we be communicating with the people that live in that area? Obviously, the people that have requested the crosswalk, they will be aware of it, but the rest of the neighborhood will not be aware of it. We would be communicating with them. Do they have a way to be able to provide their feedback? Not that it will necessarily change our mind, but is there a way to be able to inform them that this is changing and some of the practices that they may have had in the past in terms of using that portion of the street might have to change? They may not be happy about that. I'm not sure.
I will reach out to our communications experts, and I'm sure they will reach out. And it's probably not a bad thing to do is to put up some signage before the crossing signage that says crossing signage ahead. Just even if that's temporary for a year or two, and then remove it.
Okay. Councilor Barrett.
Thank you, Worship. I just have one question. Is there a restriction as to how close you can park to a crosswalk?
Yeah, we will.
5 meters. So in front of 32, basically, their entire frontage would be restricted from parking.
we don't ever go 5 meters because of that exact reason.
Yeah, a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
How about this? How about we reach out to the owners of 32 and 20, and we get a price on putting this in and bring it back to council? So we'll let the authors of the letter know that we are looking into it right now, and we'll get back to them. I mean, it is what it is. It's bad design right there, and still, we need to think about the safety of not just children, anybody crossing there, because, like I said, in the summertime, if you just step out between the parked car on 44A Street, I mean, it's busy there, and it's always full of vehicles.
So you want us to reach out to those two property owners and see how they feel about this
Yep.
proposal,
Get some feedback.
and then let the writer know that
We're looking into that at the right now, and if you could get a cost from, you know, what you really, like a real cost. I mean, I know we know what the signs are worth, and we'd probably put the signs in ourselves, but to build the ramp itself. So I'm not expecting this back by Monday, really, like, we have a little bit of time here, so let's involve the 20 and then 32, both lots, and let them know that this is what we're proposing and what their feedback would be. You're good? Okay? Yeah, and I know that's gonna be a problem. Right there, it's gonna be a problem, because you're gonna lose the whole frontage for parking. But, then again, it is a very dangerous, place for anybody to cross there when in the middle of summer, so. Okay, looks like you may be done, Director Lefebvre.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to CAO Leggett, and let's go to the Alberta Muni's RCMP contract policing decisions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Let me just pull up that piece of correspondence. Yeah, this is correspondence from AB Munis in regard to the FCM advocacy support portion. Council has the following options: send the attached draft resolution to the next council meeting for approval and issue a press release. Do not partake in the FCM advocacy. Instruct administration to explore the dispute resolution clause. In regard to payment of the retro pay, instruct administration to request an extended payment schedule with up to 2 years to pay in full, or pay the invoice in full within 45 days. And they've included some background information here. Would council like me to read that in its entirety, or?
Has everybody read the document from Alberta Munis yet? And most of us were at Alberta Munis, and we know what is going on.
Yeah.
In this case, so.
Okay. And then just as a reminder as well, there's another item on the agenda on pretty much this topic a little later.
So as far as this item goes here, it was April the 15th that we had to register for the 2-year payment schedule, but it has been extended. So, any thoughts on, should we apply for it, or should we just write the check today? Councillor Curtis.
Just one thing I'm fogging on, I can't remember, was there any additional charges if you went the 2-year route?
No.
Okay, good.
So, go ahead.
In regards to this, are we feeling that there's any option still where we may not have to pay it, in the fact of, like, once you apply for that extension, you're basically accepting the requirement to pay? Like, by virtue of writing for an extension and asking that, you've basically agreed to pay it. So I'm just wondering if there's still an option 3.
Well, this is what most other provinces through the same Alberta Munis or the Manitoba Munis, New Brunswick municipalities are encouraging all their municipalities to do right now, so that we can continue our efforts to lobby government that this was still an unjust, unfair, and unprepared situation for municipalities to be forced on us. So it's not just Alberta Munis that's pushing this. FCM is still pushing their issue that it should not be fall to the municipalities, but we're all trying to come together across the country to agree that we're not going to pay for 2 years, and so we can lobby and advocate on behalf of ourselves that this is just not the right way to go.
No, I'm comfortable with that.
Is there anybody against applying and putting our name on for the 2-year zero interest? I guess we go ahead and apply for that. Okay, next up is the CN.
Thanks again, Your Worship. Let me just get there. So, piece of correspondence addressed to yourself, Your Worship, but I'll read through this. Basically, CN's just communicating out their vegetation control, but let me just get in some better light here. Dear Mayor, CN remains committed to running its railway sustainably, as well as building a level of trust and collaboration with the communities we operate. To that end, we're reaching out to advise you of our vegetation control activities in your area between April and October 2023. A regularly updated schedule is available at cn.ca/vegetation. If not managed properly, paraphrasing, vegetation becomes a concern for CN. CN manages vegetation using both chemical and mechanical methods. We are sensitive to concerns your community may have regarding chemical vegetation control, and I would like to assure you that at CN we strive to safeguard our neighboring communities and the environment. The track infrastructure is comprised of 2 main sections: the ballast section, typically ranging from 16 to 24 feet, which is the gravel surface essentially underneath the tracks itself. The 16 to 24 foot ballast section and the areas around signals and communications are the critical safe railway operations that need to be managed using the chemical methods. Application in these safety critical areas is done by spraying trucks or spraying trains with downcast nozzles that spray a short distance above the ground surface, with shrouded booms specifically designed to limit the chemicals from drifting. The right-of-way section is maintained using mechanical control methods such as mowing or brushing, cutting, and may be chemically treated to control noxious or invasive weeds or brush. CN will use chemical control techniques on the ballast section and specific locations of the right-of-way throughout the network for safety reasons. Furthermore, when chemicals are applied via spray or truck, as outlined in the photo below, additives called surfactants are included to make the chemicals work better. CN has retained professional contractors qualified to undertake this work, and they comply with all laws and regulations applicable to CN. And just, it'll be done with considerations for the environment. Should your community have any concerns, they're encouraging us to contact at cn.ca or fill out the form at cn.ca/vegetation. And then they did provide an attached document there with some FAQs and additional information.
So pretty standard practice. Every year we get this letter. You know, in the past, we've never had any problem with any of their spraying methods or anything that they've done.
No, Your Worship, they're in, they're out, and just like magic.
Are they gonna provide a schedule when they will be in town? Councillor Lemko?
Yeah, if you click on the link they provide for the schedule, it'll show the town of Vegreville, and if you scroll through that, there is no spray in our community on that schedule. No tracks, no spray. So they're not even, this is kind of like a form letter. You click on that and you can find number 628 wherever we fit, but there is, and you go through that and it shows that there's no spray. So maybe have a look at that and see if there's.
It's I'm not passing the buck, it is a parks thing, even though I used to look after that, but we would get that correspondence always,
Yep.
but
Oh,
then I never knew when or if they did or didn't, or.
yeah.
So.
When you click on there, it shows It shows where Vegreville is, and you click on it. And it shows Town of Vegreville, overall status, no spray. Train status, no spray. Truck status, no spray. So. And if you want noxious weeds in your town, then you'll need to apply to have them spray. From reading that.
Okay, so it is just a form letter we get every year on that, and I know they do spray because there's no weeds on the tracks. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is our meeting with the RCMP. So, we had a meeting with K Division here. Director Saskew, myself, CEO Leggett, Alan, and so I think Sandra took notes. You all had a chance to read this, what was talked about at the meeting?
Yeah, and I'll just say, Your Worship, you're correct. What the memo here that was prepared was done by our legislative services manager, and it's essentially her minutes of that meeting, bullet point form there. So. Oh, and then also the response that came
The response
from
came very quickly.
very quickly. Yeah.
They were very concerned about some of the issues we brought up, the fact that we don't have anywhere near the amount of members that we're being billed for, and they couldn't understand that. We brought up that we had 7 billed to the municipality before we went into the school resource officer position, and we released that position in 2020, and it's never been taken off the bill as far as I'm concerned, because they still charge us 8+ every month. We brought up some situations where people have left this detachment. When people, anybody that's being billed to the town of Vegreville, to this municipality, after 30 days on a leave, a soft leave or hard leave, are automatically transferred over to the provincial side, and I would imagine they have some sort of insurance, I don't know. But again, they said there was some conflict. Does HR pick that up by themselves? And the members that were here said, well, they didn't know how it worked. So we brought up all of our concerns, and the fact that we're understaffed and being overbilled, and the fact that our retro pay now represents $100,000 increase, which now we are responsible for 70,000 of that over what the projection was. And the projection was based on 8 members, which we still don't agree that we have ever had that 8 members. And basically, the extra money's on the 9th person, the way I look at the billing. And that's the difference in the retro pay. So I thought, well, ask who do we contact in Ottawa to start this argument with? And they said, oh, they take care of that. They're the ones that send the projections to Ottawa. We brought up a few other things, the 5-year agreement that we just signed, and again, it changed based on they added another member. And we told them that we weren't happy with it, that it wasn't sustainable, and told them what it would look like in the next 5 years to pick up the retro pay, the extra retro pay for an extra officer we don't have, and plus the 5-year policing agreement that we signed in the extra on that per officer, plus the fact that we're paying a debenture payment on a building, and that we can no longer sustain this as a municipality our size, which is probably the smallest municipality that's captured under the provincial policing agreement. And they were very concerned about what our problems were. Very concerned. They were going to take a deep look into this. And if you read the correspondence that was sent back, they basically said, no, it's good. There was one point, and I asked about how we determine how many officers we need. They take a lot into account. So first of all, they need to know that their officers are safe, that they have enough officers on the ground, to make their policemen safe. And the next concern is to make sure that our municipality is safe. So that's how staffing levels are determined, plus how many cases are open. So we have no say in that. They determine what's safe. So when they charge this extra officer to us, for some apparent reason, it makes us safer. But if they want to run the detachment with 6 officers in total, safety of those officers or the citizens of Vegreville doesn't really matter because they make the decision on their own. But when it's on the other foot, where I asked that we have 7, bill us for 7, and, you know, we'll go away and not say much about not even having 7 in town, basically. But it didn't go very good. They were very cordial. The meeting was very nice, and there was a lot of nice words said and everything. But in the end, it was just it was a meet and greet, and they didn't really take into account what we were trying to say. And I'm not trying to say that I'm against the RCMP. I support what the officers are doing in town, the amount of weekends they're all working trying to keep us safe. And I'm not just saying Vegreville, because we're sharing in this whole region with these officers that are left 6 in the detachment right now. And for some reason, K Division can't recognize or do the math. So we need to come up with a strategy to fix it, because we can no longer keep rolling the way we are. Go ahead, CAO.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And I think that was one of the good things that came out of the meeting, was sort of an agreement, I'll call it, between, you know, our local detachment commander, who's very willing to work with us on this issue. And he's indicated he's going to, you know, provide us regular communication about who's in his building, boots on the ground. So we have a more regular, you know, set of data to reconcile the billing against. And I think that in itself will be helpful. But, you know, I don't disagree with anything you just said. Despite that email, we're still seeing differences in the numbers, and they're saying it's fine, and we're saying, but the numbers don't jive. It is what it is.
Councilor.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you had this conversation and that we're able to voice our concerns with K Division. And again, this isn't about the efficacy of the RCMP at all. This is about billing. I have one question and then one suggestion. When you're talking about the removal of a school resource officer, when the initial decision of council of that time was to bump up and support the funding of a school resource officer for 3 years, the unintended consequence of that was bumping up the staffing component so that it meant that there was no longer a sergeant level. It needed to bump up the next level of supervision. We were not explained that at the time. That was not sufficiently explained to council at the time, so we didn't know that that would be an implication. Since that time, we have not had a reduction in the leadership level. So is that any part of this scenario of the 8/9, actually 6? Has that ever been part of the conversation?
I don't know, Councilor Rudick. You're talking about stuff that kind of predates me a little bit, so I'll defer to Director Saskew, or do you got any intel on that?
That also predates me.
Yeah.
So to me, that actually is something that's important, because council at that time, I think that would have been back in 2013, the decision was made to fund that position, knowing that it was a 3-year commitment. But that also, again, triggered, we're paying a per member cost, so we're not actually paying for the management cost, but inadvertently we are. So I'm curious about whether or not the staff sergeant position is part of that math. And then this recommendation that I have is that this conversation would be worth sharing with Alberta Munis. Kelly Santa Rosa is the policy person that works on community safety for Alberta Munis. And I think this would be, again, because there are not a lot of communities that have this type of scenario like we do, we need to be very clear about what we're having as challenges so that they can accurately represent what our concern is, because I appreciate that we've done an increasingly pointed job of making sure that people understand what we're concerned about and what it is that we're concerned about, because we're in a kind of unique scenario here, and not very many people have to pay for policing and pay for a new detachment. So it's important that other people understand what we're talking about.
Well, I can't tell you how frustrating it is, and so we need to make an action plan, because basically, again, and I want the whole community to know that the officers that are on the ground are working as hard as they possibly can. It's just that there's not enough of them to go around, and the fact that we're being billed for over 8 of them that aren't even in the detachment is a problem. Councillor Barry?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to add to Councillor Riddick's statements there. Indeed, when we looked at the school resource officer, we budgeted to pay for that officer, and that did in fact increase so that the sergeant level went to a staff sergeant level. When we decided that after the 3-year trial of it, that we wouldn't continue to bear the cost of that officer in the schools, there was, I think, some concern or belief that would it then make it not be a staff sergeant because there'd be one less person there. And if I recall, they said that no, there would be some adjustments made so that it'd still be a staff sergeant. And I'm concerned now that the adjustment was they just keep charging us for another person, so that because we seem to never have had a full complement of officers in town. And I just think that we need to continue to keep looking at. I agree with you, Your Worship, that there needs to be a plan to try and get this sorted out as to just what type of service we're actually paying for.
Councillor Curtis?
Are we able to do a little more digging with this? It's just unfortunate this letter comes back and it's, nope, it's good. Like, that's the answer, right? Like you said, like it's in your documents in the past few years, but we have concerns we brought up. Even right now with the fact we're lower in staff, there's no concern on their part.
No, there's no concern on their part, but when they're evaluating the number, that's the, of officers that we need to pay for, that's their main concern, is the safety side. So we are out of that conversation, but that anytime they want, they can run as shorthanded as they want. Safety's not an issue if they decide. So again, it was not a very good meeting. Well, it felt like a good meeting. It felt like we were making progress, but the response was terrible. So I did suggest at the meeting that we use our emergency services manager, Alan, to maybe reconcile at the first of the month at how many staff members are being charged. How many are in the detachment? We'd like to see that the 4 provincial ones are on there first, and then how many more are in the detachment is probably what we're going to be billed for. We brought up that there's 2 corporal positions at our detachment, both being charged to the municipality. Why is one corporal position not being charged to the province? And their answer was, oh, well, we're going to look into that. And obviously, they didn't take it very seriously because it wasn't even part of their response. And again, we have some officers that are right now that are on some long-term leave, hard leave they call it, and then there's some right now that are on soft leave. They've had some retirements, and the positions haven't been filled. So I don't know how we do this, and I don't want to put an increased workload on the staff sergeant, but I would like to have a policy that we get there and reconcile at the first of every month at what the staffing level is and who is it being billed to. Because I have no other way to hold them accountable other than we're looking into it, but you actually have 9. Out of the full 6 that are at the detachment today, they still want to bill us for 9. There's no good way out of this. Go ahead.
So can I ask, we don't need a complete explanation, but the municipal clerk that we pay for, that works at the detachment, is that a possibility that our staff that essentially is hired by the municipality to be able to perform the work of the RCMP K division function. Is that possibility to be able to figure that out? Because I guess the challenge that I'm seeing here too is that this is always a moving target. And even at the career fair, talking to the RCMP, who had two very active tables with the students that were around, and speaking with one of the individuals there, their understanding of what this scenario and what this whole conversation of retroactive pay and what this inappropriate or inaccurate billing means to us was not there. And this is an individual that works out of the zone office in St. Paul, and I said quite clearly that his understanding is very different, and it would be important for him to understand what the implication is for us, because again, we're not disputing the fact that they need to be safe or that there needs to be greater numbers. The issue is that the bill doesn't match what our participation is. So we haven't participated in the decision-making to be able to deliver, and we also didn't participate in the amount that was actually going to be our responsibility. So there's a few parts of this process that are disconnected. So we don't direct the municipal clerk in the operations, we just provide the staff. Again, something that I don't know that everybody necessarily understands, that again, we're paying for something that we don't get to direct. We're not participating in the actual, like even having this HR conversation earlier. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about all this, but we have staff that we don't actually direct or monitor in any way, shape, or form. Is that something that could happen?
I think if we're gonna look at doing the reconciliation process, it needs to come from the detachment commander, because my understanding of that meeting is that he, in this case, is responsible for logging and doing that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's one of the clerk's functions. My understanding of that role, Councilor Rudick, is it's more of a just clerical type role within the organization. I don't believe she's responsible for HR. And certainly I think the information would have more weight coming from, you know, the detachment commander himself reporting it to us. Then we know that, okay, this is sort of the gospel truth. For this 30-day period, I had this many people available to me. So when we go and get that bill, then Director Saskew's department can marry that to, okay, here's what he's telling us, here's what the bill's saying. So, and I think that's where we need, it'll take a little bit of time for us to get there, to build that sort of pattern in that case, to be able to go back to K-Division and those senior people and say, okay, well, your email says that it's fine, guys, but we've taken the step of collecting this data. And there's absolutely, you know, if the data proves that, a disconnect between what our detachment commander is telling us. Our local person on the ground is saying this many bums are in chairs this month, and here's the bill we're receiving. Explain that. How does, you know, and we suspect that's what's happening in it, and we see that in the data, we think right now, but that's it. There still hasn't been a concrete explanation, you know, that everybody's able to have that, okay, this makes sense now.
Councilor Worley.
This is a secondary step to this, but there might be something we have to consider in a future a little bit. Theoretically, I know there's potentially been discussions on changes to the policing model, but if we said that, say, nothing changed, that it stayed the way it is, and regardless, there is that chance that the numbers may not jive, but they may say, unfortunately, the contracts as they are with some of the long-term leaves and stuff sit. And then that may be where we may need to consider going to, theoretically, say it's the province, and saying, look, you have contracted a service with a group that has these standards in place that allow for these long-term contracts. And that, but as the person who actually made and contracted that service, you maybe need to pick up or have policy or legislation to deal with what we'd call the liabilities. That a municipality should be sent the bill for the operational, which is the physical, but if the group that you contracted has the sections that allow for these leaves, that there maybe needs to be some advocacy upon them picking up some of what we would call the liabilities that are the difference between the operational and the bodies. That's not the first step. Obviously, the first step is that data, but we may need to look at that route of saying, we didn't choose the provider, you chose to contract a group that has these regulations in place that allow for these leaves. We have to pay for the operational. So I just want to throw that as maybe a secondary thought, that after this data comes in, that may be something to look at. That may be a route we could go at and say, we can pay for these numbers, but because they may very well come back and use that exact, well, unfortunately, the contract allows for those spots. And then maybe that's the route we're going to have to go, is saying, okay, but what can be done to not pass that on? Because there's not a lot that they're passing it on to. It's very few communities, ones like ours, that are catching this, right? So literally them picking up some of those liabilities might not be as big of a bill. So just something to think of in the future, maybe.
Well, I would like all the citizens of Vegreville to know, and then council to know, on the 5-year plan that we already signed, it's blown up. I mean, the numbers that we signed on don't even come close to what we signed. And they had it all laid out, the new equipment purchases, cameras, armor, in which we all agreed, this is needed, it's needed. And we knew that there was gonna come with financial implications, which means tax increases. Where we're at today, we keep heading down this direction of paying whatever they send us within this 5-year agreement. We're going to be between 12 and 15% tax increase directly to the citizens of Vegreville for RCMP policing that we don't even have. I mean, they're billing us for 8.3 sometimes, and in actual fact, on our staff right now, it looks like 4 of those members really should be billed to us. So without trying to take on this ourselves, because we are not going to get any help from K Division, I feel bad for the staff sergeant here, because he has to give us information that his boss doesn't want us to have. It's not a good situation. The province is openly giving out grant funding to municipalities to look at municipal policing right now. The model we're on right now is not sustainable with the RCMP, and having no say in the matter, no recourse, no way to fix a problem, which I thought we would have in the conversation, but basically the answer is no, we're fine. So everybody better understand that moving forward, we're going to be short at this detachment, but we're still probably going to be billed for a full command of officers. And if we're willing to pay for 3 people that don't even exist, then we'll just keep moving forward the way we are. If not, we need to take some action. And we thought by starting at the very top would be the way to go, but that backfired. So we will reply in an email that, I don't know, I'll give it a couple of days to think about it, how we'll reply, so it's not something that sounds like yelling.
Like yelling.
But
All caps.
we need to come up with a solution, and for now, I did tell the K Division that we would want it to reconcile at least once a month with officers that are in the detachment. How do we hold them to it? I don't know. And again, the staff sergeant will be providing us information that his superiors probably don't want us to have. But we're going to implement some sort of system where we can sort of keep track. That doesn't mean that they're still not going to bill us. I asked them, have you ever seen in the past where municipalities couldn't afford to pay your bill? And they said yes. So what happened? They didn't answer it, but all I want everybody to know is that where we're at right now is not sustainable, and I'm not going out in the next 5 years and increasing taxes by 15% and adding that costing on for officers that aren't even here. So we need to have a conversation with who, I don't know. Is it the Solicitor General? Like, do we bring the province in, let them know? Obviously, the route we took didn't work. So I'm open to suggestions, but I don't know where to go other than that we take this role on ourselves and be our own bookkeepers through our Department of Emergency Service. Go ahead, CA.
Yeah, thanks, George. I think in this case, my recommendation to council would be that we take, probably 4 to 6 months to gather that data, You know, put it into a spreadsheet so that when we decide to have that conversation with the next, just confirm what we think is happening, and then we're well positioned to have that, you know, business conversation with our RCMP partners, because we've checked it and double checked it, right? This is boots on the ground numbers. We're being told, here's the billing, make this make sense. I think without that data, you know, to even start going down the conversation road, we're still speculating, and it leaves it open for them to gives us this, you know, this reply that they've given us that no guys, you think there's an issue here, everything's fine. So, you know, that data I think is going to be key to really having an airtight case on our part to go have that conversation. So if council's okay with it, I think 6 months would paint a picture that would be undeniable if what we think is happening is actually happening.
I'm pretty sure it's happening.
Yep, and
I don't think it's happening. I know it's happening.
That meeting, though, was a good first step, because now it's on record. We've gone to them, we've highlighted a problem. They've come back to us with an answer, and that makes our case that much stronger when we go back to them with data. Because now the only people who don't know what's going on is them. So I think it was absolutely the right step, you guys having that meeting, because it arms you with not only that we've highlighted, it arms us with their response in writing. So I think it's really good.
Okay, so let's answer their letter with a letter of disappointment on our side, that we told them, you know, this wasn't sustainable, and their practices, we can't accept their terms any longer, so here's our terms. And this is what our plan will be moving forward, and just lay it out for them. Okay. Time is it? Okay, so that was the last piece there. I guess we'll move into roundtable. Is there anybody gotta leave right now? You do? Thanks, Al.
Your Worship, can I make a request that maybe we postpone roundtable and just
Do director highlights?
do director highlights and then have the conversation with Dan there?
Okay. Okay, so let's start with Director Saskia. Where are we at?
Thank you, Worship. I have two things for you. Today, we were notified by Shannon Stubbs, our MP, that we have been allocated 11 Canada Summer Jobs positions. So that's a total funding of $23,100. It is down from the prior year where we had funding of $35,700. So about $12,600 less. All in all of the summer student positions have been 100% budgeted for, so it's not, we don't have to make additional cuts, but we did lose, I think we had 14 or 15 last year, so we did lose a few positions that were funded federally, but we will take what we can get and we'll make it work. I am also working, as I stated earlier, on applying the paper statement fee to the property tax actual statement. So that statement is set to be mailed on May 11th. We have 2 weeks. I would like to get it by the end of April, set and ready to go. So we were successful in applying the paper statement fee to the utility bills. So utilities and taxes are two different things in our diamond system. So there is a slightly different method that this has to be set up. So far we've had minor complaints about the utility bills paper statement fee. There's been a handful of people that had the fee but shouldn't have been, or vice versa. We have been fixing those as necessary. Those fees were all applied manually, so there is human error when we're talking thousands of rolls. A handful I'm happy with, and other than that, I'm just working on finalizing the audit with the auditors. They'll be here on Monday the 24th for presentation, and what is left for the year end is the financial information return and the SFEs for our grant reporting by May 1st. So we're on track for that as well.
Any questions?
Comment.
Go Go ahead.
Just really quickly on Canada Summer Jobs, I think there's going to be people even within the community that are going to be impacted by the reductions. Just for everybody's knowledge, there was no announcement by the current government that they were reducing the amounts that were being allocated until they actually came out. And for our riding, previous year, we had approximately $1.6 million worth of jobs were put in, and it's just over 800,000. It went down half. So that's going to be a big hit to it. It's applied evenly to private, public, and non-for-profit. So they could see a reduction for other community associations, because I know that we have a number of associations and non-for-profits in our community that apply. So I think everyone's down. Just kind of want to tell you that bad news.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Saskew. Next up, Director Lefebvre.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are just now working on, municipal services, working on getting ready for the Household Hazardous Waste Roundup, which is coming on June 24th. This year we will have some assistance from ARMA as far as a slight donation to assist us with our roundup. So the municipal services manager, we're working with his staff, and they're thinking of having a QR code. So when you pull up to the roundup, you could scan the code, take a 3 or 4 question at most quick survey, then your name gets entered in for a prize that will be donated by ARMA to us. We're thinking something like a battery charged weed eater or something like that. And then we can get information like, postal code, like who's using this this is not a free service for the town of Vegreville. It does cost money, so I'd like to know who's using it, where they're coming from. And so I thought it was a really good idea for Jennifer Cherkis and Tony Timdishin to come up with. It's going to be a good information for us to have. We are moving forward slowly with the transfer station designs. We've got some Peace River and Coal Lake, because as you know, with our grant for the landfill redesign, we have enough in the project to carry on, take it right up to tender so we can see what it's going to cost. So I want to let council know that it hasn't been put on the back burner. We are moving forward with that. These are relatively new transfer stations. Our landfill will turn into an operation like a transfer station, so it's valuable to get out there and see what it's about and what they're doing, what they like, what they don't like. We are currently doing a pump house repair. We have the line that leaves the lower level of the east pump house by the pool has come apart on the outside. We've got a clamp on it, and it's come apart again just past that, so there's another clamp on there. And now at this point, we're able to distribute water out of that reservoir, and I'm working on getting someone in to do a repair, and it is a bit of a specialty repair because we're coming through the wall and tying into the existing plumbing, so you really need someone that does lift stations. So we're working with our Excalibur, who's doing lift station now. And the bank stabilization project, Associate Engineering is on their way applying for permits, and we're planning to go to a tender in August and award and finish the project in October.
Perfect. Any questions? Seeing none, okay, let's move to the CAO highlights.
Thank you, Worship. Just one out of the list there that I'd just like to make everybody aware of, and that's the bike park. I sent out an email there a day or two ago at Councilor Lemko's request, so thanks for that. Yeah, contractor Coville has started working on that. I went and looked at it today. He's moved a ton of dirt already. Because of the size and scope of the project, I mean, we didn't go out for a formal design with an architect or anything like that, so we're kind of doing it just based off some pictures from, from bike parks on the internet. But the owners of Coville are avid bikers, as am I in my past there, so we'll have something that's looking pretty good by the time it's all said and done. Drastic improvement over what was in there.
Okay, so, go ahead, Councilor Bullock.
Geez, I thought I got skinny there for a bit, but anyways, CEO Leggett, the BMX pump track. I was just wondering if it'd be wise if we did a little community engagement piece on that. There was some negative press on Rant and Rave last night about it, and they just thought it was just getting taken away and everything like that. So.
Yeah, I was made aware of that. I think it was sort of dispelled after somebody went in and sort of commented what was happening.
I had a phone call come to me and I straightened it out.
Okay. Yeah.
unsightly commercial property, letter to remedy has been issued. Is it return date or answer April 30th, clean up April 30th?
We'd given the owner of the property until April 30th to come back with a game plan as to what they might want to do to satisfy, our concerns with it, so, yeah.
Okay, I have one last item here, and it's regarding Councillor Rudick. So I'd like to read a statement that Councillor Rudick has sent to us. So, please be advised that further to the discussion that Council and Administration had after April 4th Legislative Committee meeting, that I will take a leave from Council in the near future. I was acclaimed as the NDP candidate for the Fort Saskatchewan Vegreville constituency as of April the 3rd, 2023, and in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, can continue to serve in this capacity as a Vegreville Town Councillor until such time I'm elected to another office. However, I feel it would be best to take a leave of absence from the Town Council when the provincial election writ is dropped, which is anticipated to be around May the 1st for a provincial election set currently for Monday, May the 29th. Because the provincial election is likely to be declared without much advance notice, please find this email, this letter, as my notification that I will take leave when the writ is officially dropped, and my boards and committees will need to be supported by other councillors in my stead. So thank you for providing that information for us and for the general public. At no time does Councillor Rudick need to step away from this council until she is either elected to another official office. But knowing who she is, she feels that it's important that she steps away from this position when the writ is dropped. And I thank you for your letter. And so anybody out there that feels that that Councillor Rudick is doing anything wrong or illegal, she has no obligation to step away from her role as a councillor until the day she's elected to a different office. But on her own, she has taken the steps that the day the writ will be dropped is the day that she will take a leave of absence from this council. So everybody needs to understand that. Moving forward, there may be a bit of a time period where we need to put an alternate on two different boards. So one would be the MD of Minburn Foundation, and the other is the Vegreville Library Board. So, and I'll reiterate that until the writ is dropped, she still holds all of her positions on the boards and meetings coming up. But in the interim, we would be looking for an alternate on either one of these boards. Is there anybody at this time that would like to volunteer to be the alternate on either one of these boards? Councillor Bullock? Okay, you will now become, is there anybody else want to fight for that position? Seeing none? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. The Vegreville Library Board, is there anybody that would like?
I don't want.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have those two positions of alternates filled.
You didn't ask anyone when to fight for that one.
Well, I just know how tough you can be.
Okay.
Nobody wants to take you on when it comes to books. Oh, Councillor Barry, you've had that position.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. No,
If there is a need for an alternate on the Northern Lights Committee during the situation, would you then be the?
I'm already the alternate for Northern Lights. Unfortunately, I cannot attend their next meeting. That's,
They'll probably shut it down.
yeah, I'm certain, I'm gonna give them notice so that they can postpone it, yes.
Okay.
But I would not be able to attend that one on May 20th.
So no, having somebody that's doesn't know the process of the Northern Lights Board, I don't think that it would be a very good idea to send somebody that's new. Okay, so is there any other further business of council? Okay, then seeing none, I adjourn this meeting at 5:58. Huh?